none of the primordial realm experts gathered there recognized the murderer of Mo Cheng, who was the disciple of the Azure Peng King. Among the many spaceships parked behind the primordial realm experts, a veiled, slender woman stood on the deck of one of the spaceships. From far away, she could also see the scene that the Azure Peng King had conjured through his secret technique. However, when she saw Mo Cheng's murderer, her body immediately trembled gently. She said softly, "Why is it him?" The woman spoke extremely softly, basically as loudly as a mosquito. However, the Azure Peng King had been paying close attention to the surroundings. Even from very far away, he could clearly hear what the woman had murmured without even using the senses of his soul due to his current level of cultivation. With a flash, the Azure Peng King traveled a great distance and appeared on the woman's spaceship like he had teleported. "You recognize this person?" The Azure Peng King stared at the veiled woman coldly as a terrifying pressure surged out, causing the spaceship to totter. Countless formations flashed, unleashing the defenses of the spaceship. However, even when the spaceship had activated its formations, the Azure Peng King's pressure was still enough to make people feel like they would shatter. "Senior Peng King, please do not be angry. This is the princess of our Thousand Lotus Empire, Yun Xiaoyan. Please do not make things difficult for the sake of our Thousand Lotus ancestor, Senior Peng King." An old woman appeared before the veiled woman in a flash as she said submissively. She was also a primordial realm expert, but she was only an infinite prime. "Humph. This king doesn't care whether you're from the Thousand Lotus Empire or the 10,000 Lotus Empire. This king has asked you whether you recognize the murderer of this king's disciple?" The Azure Peng King's face was cold as he glared at the veiled Yun Xiaoyan. He did not take the Thousand Lotus Empire seriously at all. Yun Xiaoyan greets Senior Peng King. "It's just that Senior has misunderstood. I do not recognize this person, nor do I know about this person's origins." Yun Xiaoyan bowed towards the Azure Peng King with difficulty under the tremendous pressure. "Humph, do you think this king is easy to fool?" The Azure Peng King snorted coldly as his eyes shone in a frightening manner. At the same time, the spaceship that Yun Xiaoyan stood on trembled violently, and with a few muffled explosions, the Azure Peng King crushed quite a few defensive formations on the spaceship to pieces. The quality of Yun Xiaoyan's spaceship was impressive, and the defensive formations were of high grades as well. They could easily block attacks from infinite primes, yet they were like toys before the Azure Peng King. "Tell this king everything you know about this person. This king has many methods to obtain what this king wants from you, so you better not force this king to use them," the Azure Peng King said coldly. Killing intent wrapped around him, causing the surrounding space to seemingly become icy cold. Whether it was the infinite prime old woman or the veiled Yun Xiaoyan, they both paled under the pressure of the Azure Peng King. "Senior Peng King, you are someone of high status, yet you would stoop as low as to harass a woman that's only a god king. If this makes it out, it'll probably damage Senior Peng King's renown." At this moment, a gentle woman's voice rang out. A woman with an otherworldly presence appeared on the spaceship out of nowhere. She was in a red dress. Her beauty was enough to outshine the moon, but she clearly kept her presence concealed, so she seemed ordinary right now. She faced the Azure Peng King calmly. The Azure Peng King's face sank slightly when he saw the woman. He said, "It looks like it's the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. But what of it? Does the 8th Majesty plan on sticking her nose in matters that don't concern her?" Immediately, the surrounding primordial realm experts all gazed over when they heard that the 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing was present. Even the solitary sword ancestor who sat on the meteor could not help but pay attention as well. Earlier, the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing had forced her way into the Neptunian Divine Palace as if she possessed supreme power. How unstoppable she seemed had deeply shocked everyone present. As a result, even though the junior of the First Majesty, the 8th Majesty, had not neared the peak of cultivation yet, she still struck fear in the hearts of everyone due to the glory of the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. "Senior Peng King has misunderstood. I just happened to have some things that I wanted to ask Yun Xiaoyan as well. I wonder if Senior would mind?" The 8th Majesty smiled gently. Although she had asked for the Azure Peng King's opinion, she did not wait for him to reply. She just turned around and said to Yun Xiaoyan, "Yun Xiaoyan, would you mind paying a visit to my divine hall?" As she said that, she seemed like she was about to take Yun Xiaoyan away. The 8th Majesty's invitation startled both Yun Xiaoyan and the old woman. "Humph. 8th Majesty, do you really think you can do whatever you want because you have the support of your first senior, and that you don't have to take this king seriously at all? The Azure Pung King said with a sunken face. If it were not for the fact that he feared the first majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, he would have never allowed a chaotic prime to act arrogantly before him. Senior Pung King, if you want to find the murderer of your disciple, you are more than welcome to wait for him to come out of the Neptunian divine palace. Why must you cause trouble for innocent people? Yun Xiaoyan, let's go. The 8th Majesty took Yun Xiaoyan with her as she looked at the Azure Pung King with a murderous gaze. Yun Xiaoyan, I want to learn about what happened in the Neptunian divine palace. You can tell me everything you experienced. In a Majesty Divine Hall, the 8th Majesty sat on a piece of jade as she looked at Yun Xiaoyan. Don't tell me that you never entered the Neptunian divine palace. Although you haven't come out of the Neptunian divine palace, there are some matters that you can't hide from me. Yun Xiaoyan's face became bitter when she heard that. She knew that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing were all people of great ability. They knew many ancient and powerful secret techniques, allowing them to see through many secrets. Even when she wanted to hide things from people like them, she probably would not have the ability. They would even be able to tell if she was lying or not. 8th Majesty, although a clone of mine did enter the Neptunian divine palace, she died before long. As a result, Yun Xiaoyan does not know much about what happened in the Neptunian divine palace. Yun Xiaoyan did not dare to hide anything from the 8th Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. She told her everything she knew, including what happened with Ming Dong. Ming Dong's sure shone brightly in the Neptunian divine palace. However, I can tell that your thread of karma with Ming Dong is not as simple as grievances. Your primary body has hurried over from the distant Thousand Lotus Empire, probably for Ming Dong as well, right? The 8th Majesty said. Chapter 2170, Successor of the Third Ancestor. It looks like I can't hide anything from the 8th Majesty. Yun Xiaoyan became extremely polite. Before the highly esteemed 8th Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing, she appeared to be extremely cautious. Even though she was the princess of the Thousand Lotus Empire, possessing great status, she was unable to face the 8th Majesty with composure. Outside the Neptunian divine palace, the Azure Pung King still did not give up on his search for information on Mo Cheng's murderer. He had always been an extremely sensitive person and was unruly. There was an almost feral amount of cruelty hidden within him. Now that Mo Cheng, who he placed high hopes on, had died, he had the urge to find the organization behind the murderer to settle the debt. However, after groups of god kings emerged from the Neptunian divine palace one after another, the Azure Pung King finally learned that the name of his disciple's murderer was Ming Dong. Ming Dong's connection with the heavenly palace of Bishing had only been revealed at the very end, while the god kings who had come out just now had left early. They had no idea that the 5 experts who followed Ming Dong were divine generals from the heavenly palace of Bishing. As a result, the Azure Pung King learnt of nothing apart from his name. Ming Dong, good. Very good. This king doesn't care who you are, as this king won't let you leave alive for killing this king's disciple. And how dare the organization behind you give you permission to act so recklessly in the Neptunian divine palace? Once I understand your background, I will definitely pay a personal visit to the organization behind you. The Azure Pung King's cold voice rang out. Chilling, killing intent almost seemed to make the space there seize up. However, no one knew whether he would still be bold enough to talk so big in such a fearless manner once he learnt that Ming Dong was the 9th Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Near the 4 Grand Prime statues on the 12th floor of the Neptunian divine palace, Shui Yunlan, Adriana, Ming Dong, Rui Di, and Ji Yi all remained seated like statues. They devoted themselves to recovering their vitality. But at this moment, a single and light zither sound suddenly rang out. The pleasant sound seemed to be filled with endless char, as if it could pierce through all obstructions and be heard clearly from everywhere. There were several dozen god kings recovering on the 12th floor as well. Many of them had cast down layers of formation around them, but the zither sound managed to pierce through the formations effortlessly, alarming everyone there. At that moment, all the people there opened their eyes and stared at the same place. Shangguan Mu'er sat there in a purple dress with her eyes closed. All 36 strings of the zither of the demonic cry across her knees actually leapt about without anyone's control, playing the wondrous music. As the music rang out, it seemed to bear the laws of the world, possessing a profound charm of laws. It could also enchant the minds of people. In just 5 seconds, everyone, Shui Yunlan included, seemed to have become intoxicated. The music had sucked away their souls unknowingly, causing their minds to sink into the music. It was also at this moment that a single inscription flashed between Ming Dong's eyebrows. Ming Dong roused in that instance after having his mind drawn away. Sister-in-law. Ming Dong called out as he stared at Shangguan Mu'er in surprise. Don't worry. Shangguan Mu'er opened her eyes slowly and said calmly. Afterwards, she gently pressed her slender white hands against the strings. Immediately, the strings that leapt about by themselves stopped, and so did the enchanting music. This is the 2 tunes of the demonic and divine engraved within Zither of the demonic cry. I just wanted to check out the power of the 2 tunes. It won't harm anyone here, said Shangguan Mu'er as her enchanting eyes were filled with undisguised surprise and joy. She had finally awakened the artifact spirit slumbering within the Zither of the demonic cry. She had already gained the basic recognition of the Zither of the demonic cry back in the lower world, so she had used the Zither for many years now. Now that the artifact spirit had awakened, it naturally did not to object her at all. It treated her as the only successor of the 3rd ancestor, and accepted her as its master extremely successfully. This is the legendary 2 tunes of the demonic and divine? No wonder it's terrifying. It actually managed to control my mind unknowingly. Xue Yunlan returned to her senses, and her emotionless eyes were filled with seriousness. Adriana also stared at the Zither of the demonic cry in surprise. She said gently, the records of our God clan have detailed that when the 3rd ancestor of the Taoist sect of divine sound personally plays the divine tune, she can invoke the mysteries of the world and allow people to connect with the laws of the world such that comprehension becomes hundreds of times easier than usual. Moreover, it can heal wounds of the soul, making it extremely profound. With the demonic tune, she could throw laws into disarray, reverse yin and yang, and control the souls of grand primes. The 2 tunes of the demonic and divine was the most terrifying technique of the Taoist sect of divine sound in the past. I never thought you'd grasp it now. Rue Di and Ji Yi stared at Shangguan Mu'er in surprise. Due to how short the sect of dragons and phoenixes had been around for, they did not know about the rumors of the 3rd ancestor as well as Xue Yunlan or Adriana. However, having become temporarily lost earlier, they were extremely shocked. Mu'er, has the artifact spirit of the Zither of the demon cry awakened? Jian Chen also rushed back and stared at Shangguan Mu'er happily. Yeah. On this floor, there's some soul energy that has never dispersed. Once the artifact spirit absorbed enough of this power, it awakened. Shangguan Mu'er smiled faintly. She looked at the surroundings and said, only once the artifact spirit awakened did I learn that the soul energy came from the ancestor of the Taoist sect of Neptunia that was only second to Grand Exalts. His soul was wiped out, but perhaps because the Neptunian divine palace had been sealed off, or perhaps due to some other reasons, a tiny portion of his soul energy lingered on this floor. Jian Chen was surprised when he heard that. Immediately, he covered up Shangguan Mu'er's mouth. Now that the artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace had awakened, if he learnt that the Zither of the demonic cry was absorbing the residual soul energy of his old master, no one knew what would happen. However, Jian Chen had already secretly communicated with the sword spirits in an attempt for them to absorb the soul energy there to recover their powers, just like how the artifact spirit of the Zither of the demonic cry had awakened. Due to the special characteristics of the Zither of the demon cry, it can absorb the soul energy here, but we can't. We can't even sense the soul energy here properly, the sword spirit said helplessly. Pity filled Jian Chen's face. If the sword spirits could recover some of their power through the soul energy here, the assistance that they could bring him in the future would be immeasurable. After a moment of hesitance, Jian Chen looked at everyone and said, the artifact spirit has already broken free, and Xiao Man will successfully become the new master of the Neptunian Divine Palace. I think we can leave here very soon. Jian Chen, what do you plan on doing next? Adriana asked. She did not care about who the Neptunian Divine Palace belonged to, as she had only come here under the orders of the war god. Jian Chen, come with me back to the heavenly palace of Bisheng. My 8th senior is outside, and my 1st senior just showed herself earlier. As long as you come with me, I can guarantee you that no matter how many people you've offended in the Neptunian Divine Palace, they won't be able to do anything to you, said Ming Dong. He also did not seem to care about the Neptunian Divine Palace. Xue Yunlan remained silently. Currently, she struggled to even protect herself, where she could not even leave through the main entrance of the Neptunian Divine Palace. She was of no help at all at a time like this. Rue Di and Ji Yi also said nothing. Although Jian Chen came from the same homeland as them, Jian Chen had offended far too many people in the Neptunian Divine Palace. The heritage of their sect of dragons and phoenixes was shallow, so they were completely unable to provide any help to Jian Chen. Ming Dong, I have my own path that I must take. I'll leave the Neptunian Divine Palace through the teleportation formation here. Jian Chen turned down Ming Dong's invitation. He had his own pride and dignity. He did not want to rely on others. Moreover, he had the sword spirits with him, so he did not dare to go to the heavenly palace of Bishing. Mu'er, you better return to the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. Don't go to the cloud plane for now. Staying at the Taoist sect of Divine Sound instead will help you substantially, Jian Chen then said to Shangguan Mu'er. He also understood that he could not to take Shangguan Mu'er with him with the situation he currently faced. Chapter 2171. The End of a Journey. I'll continue to cultivate in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound for a while. Although the artifact spirit of the zither of the demonic cry has awakened now, allowing me to complete my inheritance of the third ancestor's legacy, there are still various notes that the third ancestor has left behind in the Taoist sect of Divine Sound. They'll provide me with quite a lot of assistance. Shangguan Mu'er looked at Jian Chen, and worry filled her enchanting eyes. She said, You've created such a great disturbance in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and it's also because of you that all the Supreme God Kings lost their only chance at obtaining the Neptunian Divine Palace. There must be a lot of people outside who have memorized you, so your future journey will definitely be very difficult. You need to be careful. Jian Chen smiled without minding too much. Mu'er, don't worry. I won't die that easily. All right, here's a cosmic movement talisman. Keep it for a crucial time. It can save your life. You better take it. Jian Chen passed a cosmic movement talisman to Shangguan Mu'er. It's actually a cosmic movement talisman. Where did you get it from? Adriana, Rue D, and Ji Yi were all surprised when they heard Jian Chen mention this talisman. The cosmic movement talisman is a god-tier talisman. It can ignore any obstructions in space or formations. It's said that it's possible to even escape from grand primes with a cosmic movement talisman, explained Xue Yunlan. Shangguan Mu'er understood the value of the cosmic movement talisman from the explanation. She could not help but become touched as she declined the talisman. She said caringly, Jian Chen, you better keep it for yourself. You need it more than me. I have more on me. You have to accept this no matter what. I'll also be at ease if I know you have a talisman that can save your life on you, Jian Chen said firmly, leaving no room for discussion. All right then. I'll accept this cosmic movement talisman for now. But don't forget, we promised Xiao Bao in the past that we'd go and get him within 10,000 years. Shangguan Mu'er looked at Jian Chen deeply. Jian Chen could not help but think about his child who was waiting for his return on the Tianyuan continent once Xiao Bao was mentioned. He also thought about Yu Yu, Huang Luan, his relatives, and his brothers. Reminiscence flooded out from his heart. At this moment, Jian Chen and his group suddenly felt the landscape around them change. They had abruptly been taken to the 12th floor by a mysterious power. They had appeared in a huge cave that seemed ancient. The sudden occurrence immediately alarmed everyone. They became cautious. Don't worry, it's the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace, said Jian Chen. Only the artifact spirit that controlled everything could do something like this in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Brother Jian Chen. Xiao Man's voice rang out from nearby. She and the artifact spirit, the 4-foot-tall old man, appeared beside Jian Chen silently. She looked at Jian Chen happily. The artifact spirit, on the other hand, studied Ming Dong with his small eyes. He also glanced at the 5 divine generals behind Ming Dong from time to time. The light in his eyes flickered as he seemed to be thinking of something. Xiao Man, you succeeded? Jian Chen looked at Xiao Man with a smile. Xiao Man nodded happily. I've already gained a basic grasp over the Neptunian Divine Palace. Brother Jian Chen, do you know that I now feel like I've become a part of the Neptunian Divine Palace? I can sense its changes at all times. It's an extremely wondrous feeling. It's just that I heard from the artifact spirit that I still have a very long way to go before I can fully control the Neptunian Divine Palace on my own. All right. Artifact spirit, bring me all the legacies in the Neptunian Divine Palace. This is my deal with Brother Jian Chen, Xiao Man said to the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit nodded. He had already heard about this from Xiao Man, so he immediately reached out and closed his hand. Immediately, all the formations and restrictions around the legacies that the primordial realm experts had left behind shattered at the same time. The various legacies that had existed there for millions of years all vanished at that moment. When the legacies appeared again, they all floated before the artifact spirit. The artifact spirit was basically omnipotent in the Neptunian Divine Palace. He could control the powers of the Neptunian Divine Palace as he wished. Unless he encountered an existence that possessed power beyond the Neptunian Divine Palace, a high-quality god artifact, nothing could escape from him. As a result, the various formations from chaotic primes and the even weaker infinite primes were useless before the artifact spirit. There's a total of 5 chaotic prime legacies and 18 infinite prime legacies. Since it's the Little Master's orders, you can have these legacies, the artifact spirit said. He looked at the various legacies that hovered before him with a mixed expression. Jian Chen did not hold back, accepting all the legacies that were basically enough to make everyone green with envy. These legacies were presented in different forms. Some of them were space rings, some were sculptures, while others were presented as a stream of consciousness, stored within multicolored beads. Without a single exception, all of the legacies came with a space ring. Ruidi, Ji, according to our agreement, these belong to you. Jian Chen handed 30% of the legacies to Ruidi and Ji. This was what they had agreed on. Looking at a chaotic prime's legacy and multiple infinite prime's legacies hovering before them, Ruidi and Ji were very tempted, but they did not accept it immediately. Instead, they hesitated. In the end, Ruidi and Ji only took an infinite prime's legacy each. They said, "Actually, we haven't been a lot of help. If we really take 30%, we'll be guilt-ridden. As a result, Ji and I will just take a single infinite prime's legacy each." If it were not for the fact that the sect of dragons and tigers is lacking in heritage and requires these items, the two of us would have never accepted anything, Ji said rather helplessly. After accepting the items, Ruidi and Ji bid farewell and left. Soon afterwards, Adriana left as well. She hurried back to the god clan to report to the war god about what had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace. "Brother, since you don't want to return to the heavenly palace of Bishing, I won't force you to. I'll be going to the Cloud Plain next to have a look at the Tian Yuan clan you founded. Is there any messages you want me to bring to them?" Ming Dong asked. Jian Chen hesitated slightly before passing all the legacies he had obtained from the Neptunian Divine Palace to Ming Dong. Then he took out some god-tier heavenly resources from his space ring and said, "Take these to the Tian Yuan clan and see if any of them are suitable for these legacies." "All right. You don't have to worry then. I know how to approach this matter. I'll stay in the clan for a while when I go this time, so you don't need to worry about the safety of the Tian Yuan clan. With my identity as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, protecting a single clan is nothing difficult," Ming Dong promised. He did indeed possess that right and confidence with his current identity. After he learned of Ming Dong's identity, even the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was surprised. He thought, "And I had thought that this person was a disciple of a majesty from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. I never thought he'd be the 9th Majesty." In the past, the Heavenly Palace of Bishing only had 8 majesties. These 8 majesties were the direct disciples of the Anata Grand Exalt. In reality, only the direct disciples of the Anata Grand Exalt can be referred to as majesties. Since this person has been referred to as the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing, he should also be a direct disciple of the Anata Grand Exalt. The artifact spirit glanced at Ming Dong deeply and showed prudence that rarely appeared. He turned his head towards Xiao Man and said secretly, "Little Master, this person called Ming Dong has an extraordinary identity. You better use this rare opportunity to develop ties with him. His master is extremely impressive. Out of the 7 Grand Exalts of the Saints' world, the Anata Grand Exalt is an existence that ranks within the top 3. He's renowned and only second to the war god from the god clan." But I don't know him," replied Xiao Man. She had no idea what to do. The artifact spirit had perfectly concealed what she said, so despite her strength, none of the god kings heard her. "Brother, take care. Don't forget that we still have to go back to the Tian Yuan continent together and visit our homeland. I'll be waiting for your return." Ming Dong bid farewell to Jian Chen and left with the 5 divine generals. Afterwards, Shangguan Mu'er also bid farewell to Jian Chen reluctantly and left the Neptunian Divine Palace. Now that the Neptunian Divine Palace had a master, and Jian Chen was about to leave through the teleportation formation, there was no reason for them to remain any longer, so they all bid farewell. In the blink of an eye, everyone was gone. Only Jian Chen and Xue Yunlan remained there. Brother Jian Chen, will you be leaving too? Xiaoman could not help but ask as she saw Jian Chen stand there all by himself. She was reluctant for him to leave. Jian Chen sighed deeply and dismissed his empty emotions. He looked at Xiaoman and said, "That's right, I'll be leaving too. Xiaoman, please let us borrow the teleportation formation in your Neptunian Divine Palace." Brother Jian Chen, just stay in the Neptunian Divine Palace and cultivate. The artifact spirit said that there are still a lot of resources in here. It'll be very safe for you to cultivate here, and Sister Zi Yun will be here as well. Xiaoman urged Jian Chen to stay. She seemed to be pleading him. As she was still young and naive, she still believed that Jian Chen held feelings for Zi Yun. Xiaoman's urgings immediately displeased the artifact spirit greatly. Without asking for Xiaoman's permission, he controlled the power of the Neptunian Divine Palace and moved Jian Chen and Xue Yunlan to the teleportation formation. He said, "This is the teleportation formation, but where you get transported to is random. The only thing I can guarantee is that it'll be absolutely safe. Now go." The artifact spirit seemed to be afraid that Jian Chen would remain behind. Jian Chen smiled faintly and declined Xiaoman's urgings. He entered the teleportation formation with Xue Yunlan and vanished from the Neptunian Divine Palace. He did not ask about the Pernite or the Samsaric Immortal Exalt had mentioned. First of all, the Pernite ore was terrifyingly hot. Even when he could last a few seconds at the bottom of the lava now, he still could not collect the Pernite Oregon. Moreover, the artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace had awakened. It definitely knew the importance of the Pernite ore, so it would never let him get a single piece of it. "Little master, you're far too naive. Fortunately, I held back and didn't give all the legacies to that little bastard. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been just a great loss for us. But even with just the tiny portion he has taken, and the fact that they're weaker legacies, he has still had it easy." The artifact spirit immediately sniggered after Jian Chen and Xue Yunlan had left. He seemed like an old scheming rascal as over another dozen primordial realm legacies appeared before him. The primordial realm experts from various organizations waited anxiously outside the Neptunian Divine Palace. Many of their faces were filled with worry, and some of them had even paled from anger. "Is Zhu Wen's name still on the God King's throne?" An illusionary old man descended on a huge spaceship and asked in a dignified manner. "Great Elder, young Master Zhu's name remains on the God King's throne. It has not vanished," a few middle-aged men said politely before the illusionary old man. "Fantastic. Zhu Wen is the most outstanding descendant of our ancient Zhu clan in almost 1,000,000 years. He carries the heavy hopes of revitalizing the clan. We can't let any accidents happen to him. I'll leave my clone right here. I want to personally witness him emerge from the Neptunian Divine Palace alive." "Is the young lady's name still on the God King's throne?" A husky, old voice rang out on another spaceship for the umpteenth time. "Patriarch, the young lady's name is still on the God King's throne. I hope that Ruedi and Ji Yi can emerge safely." Something similar rang out from a dragon-shaped spaceship. The person who said this was a ruddy old man. He seemed ordinary, but he also seemed dignified. He was called Ruedi, one of the elders of the sect of dragons and phoenixes. He was also one of the most powerful members in the sect right now, a peak chaotic prime. If I had known that something so severe would happen in the Neptunian Divine Palace, I would have never sent in Ruedi and Ji Yi back then. They're the clansmen with the greatest talent and highest potential ever since our sect of dragons and phoenixes has been founded. It's extremely likely for them to become grand primes in the future, which would allow our sect of dragons and phoenixes to truly stand among the ranks of peak organizations. Similar scenes occurred in many places. Clearly, many large organizations were worried about the supreme god kings who were still alive. There were many people with high status among these god kings, and some of them even held the hopes of their clan rising up. However, at this moment, a great power suddenly pulsed at the entrance of the Neptunian Divine Palace, and a great group of people appeared out of nowhere. These people were god kings at most, and almost all of them were pale-faced and haggard, where it was possible to tell that they were extremely frail from a single glance. They were the supreme god kings who had survived in the end. Most of them remained seated, clearly still recovering. They had no clue that they had already left the Neptunian Divine Palace. Only when the coldness of outer space surged over did they become alarmed. They opened their eyes and were all stunned. What has happened? Why have I suddenly appeared outside? Many Supreme God Kings were confused as to what had happened. They're out. They're all out. At the same time, an uproar erupted in the dark, lonely space. All the experts who had been waiting for quite some time surged over. I never thought the artifact spirit would directly send me outside. He saved me the effort of traveling. Ming Dong also happened to be among the God Kings who had been sent out. He had been making his way towards the first floor with the 5 divine generals, but in the end, he had been sent away by the Neptunian Divine Palace's power when he had just left the 9th floor. Let's go and find my 8th senior. I want to go to the cloud plane, and I need my 8th senior to send me some more powerful divine generals. Haha, I wonder how that little tiger is like after all these years now, and newbies that proud snake, Ming Dong laughed. Clearly, he was extremely happy. You're Ming Dong? My disciple's murderer? At this moment, an extremely heavy killing intent swept out, causing space to tremble and shatter as countless stars flickered. Ming Dong's face suddenly changed. The killing intent targeted him. Just from it shooting over from afar, his blood froze, and he felt like his body was about to be ripped apart. He could not resist at all. Ming Dong looked over, and all he saw before him was a middle-aged man in azure robes. He had appeared silently as he stared at Ming Dong resentfully. Ming Dong could sense a terrifying presence that was as great as a tsunami from the man. Not only did his feet and hands grow cold before the presence while his body experienced chills, but he also could not move at all under the terrifying pressure. The 5 divine generals behind Ming Dong all gritted their teeth. They wanted to equip their hidden armor, but under the man's presence, even such a simple action became extremely difficult. They were truly as puny as ants before this man. They could not even flee. Unsurprisingly, the middle-aged man in azure robes was the Azure Pung King. When the Azure Pung King blocked Ming Dong, figures constantly flickered in the surroundings. Primordial realm experts appeared like they had teleported over, taking away their Supreme God Kings safely in fear that they would become a casualty to what was about to happen. Many primordial realm experts also glanced at Ming Dong sympathetically. In their eyes, Ming Dong's fate was set in stone since he had offended the Azure Pung King. At that moment, all the surviving Supreme God Kings were taken away, only leaving Ming Dong and the 5 divine generals there. It was not that they did not want to leave. Rather, the Azure Pung King's pressure had completely immobilized them. They could not leave even when they wanted to. Blood oozed out from the corner of Ming Dong's lips. He had not recovered completely yet, and coupled with the impact from the powerful presence, he immediately showed signs of weakness. He felt like he was being ripped apart. Since my disciple Emo Chung died to your hands, you will die as well, no matter where you come from, the Azure Pung King said coldly. The disciple he treated with the greatest importance and held extremely high hopes for had died to Ming Dong's hands, so he naturally hated Ming Dong very much. He did not want to take Ming Dong's life so easily. He had already made up his mind to torture Ming Dong in the most brutal manner first. What a temper, Pung King! At this moment, a gentle and extremely pleasant voice rang out. The 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing strode over gently in her red dress. Her steps were not hurried, but she traveled a great distance with every step. She appeared before Ming Dong like she had teleported. With the 8th Majesty's arrival, Ming Dong immediately felt the tremendous presence vanish. As he felt relieved, he also experienced a wave of weakness, and he almost collapsed. Do you plan on being nosy again? The Azure Pung King's face sank as he glared at the 8th Majesty. Fury rose up. Previously, he had allowed the 8th Majesty to take away Yun Xiaoyan out of respect for the 1st Majesty. However, when he faced the murderer of his disciple now, the 8th Majesty actually planned on intervening again. This made his face darken. They're from our Heavenly Palace of Bishing. Does Senior Pung King plan on becoming enemies with the Heavenly Palace of Bishing? Please consider that carefully, Senior Pung King, the 8th Majesty said calmly, but she had already used a unique secret technique to call into the distance, First Senior Sister. What? Ming Dong is actually from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing? No wonder he's bold enough to even kill the disciple of the Azure Pung King. As it turns out, he has the Heavenly Palace of Bishing support. The 8th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing has stood forward. Who knows what the Azure Pung King will do? The Azure Pung King is infamous. He's not a person that can be reasoned with. Coupled with his Azure Pung movement technique, his speed is almost unmatched. He's not someone that can be provoked easily. Even across the entire Saints world, there are not a lot of people who would disrespect the Azure Pung King. In the distance, the primordial realm experts who did not care about Ming Dong originally began to pay close attention after the Eighth Majesty's appearance. They all glanced between the Azure Pung King and the Eighth Majesty as they showed interest. One of them was an infamous despot of the Saints world, while the other was the Eighth Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. Both sides possessed great backgrounds, which made all the primordial realm experts eager to see whether the two of them would clash. He has killed the disciple that I take the most pride in. The Eighth Majesty should understand this king's temperament. Does the Eighth Majesty really plan on protecting this person? The Azure Pung King was emotionless as his presence erupted like a burst dam. It caused the stars to dim as space collapsed. He stood in a spatial crack that constantly collapsed and healed up as he stared at the Eighth Majesty coldly. He showed no intention of backing down. He really is the Azure Pung King. He's so unruly that even the Heavenly Palace of Bishing can't deter him. Although the Azure Pung King is nowhere close to being invincible in terms of strength, his speed is basically unmatched. It's true that everyone else in the Heavenly Palace of Bishing can no longer deter the Azure Pung King anymore aside from the First Majesty. If he insists on fleeing, no one can stop him. Many primordial realm experts discussed with each other secretly. Many of them looked at the Azure Pung King with deep fear and dread. So you are Mo Cheng's master. Azure Pung King, the Neptunian Divine Palace is a place filled with competition. The only thing you can blame for your disciple's death is that he wasn't strong enough. It's no one else's fault. Don't you find it shameful to lower yourself and attack a junior like me just for a failure of a disciple? Ming Dong yelled at the Azure Pung King fearlessly. He showed no respect at all. How dare you? The Azure Pung King bellowed out. His face paled in anger when an ant-like junior argued against him before everyone. Suddenly, he exploded with azure light, which condensed into a huge wing. Like a blade, the wing shot forwards with terrifying, devastating power. Naturally, he was using the wing condensed from azure light against the Eighth Majesty who blocked his way. Under everyone's watch, he was naturally not bold enough to truly injure the Eighth Majesty. As a result, the wing was only meant to keep the Eighth Majesty busy. The method to kill Ming Dong originated from the wing. It was a feather completely condensed from azure light. It was a feather, but it also seemed like a scale. It ripped through space along the way, shooting towards Ming Dong with lightning speed. Azure Pung King, don't you dare! The Eighth Majesty called out. Her voice was no longer gentle, filled with viciousness and killing intent. She was powerless to stop the feather that shot towards Ming Dong. She could only watch it approach him with unbelievable speed. However, at this moment, the space around Ming Dong suddenly distorted. The feather from the Azure Pung King came to a halt when it came in contact with the distorted space around Ming Dong. It had been forcefully stopped. Afterwards, the distorted space suddenly cracked open, and a white slender hand extended out. It pressed towards the Azure Pung King gently with a palm strike. Immediately, space shook heavily, and all the laws in the surroundings were affected, having been thrown into disarray. The seemingly simple palm strike happened to have the terrifying power of being able to rip worlds apart. It impacted all the laws in the surroundings. Chapter 2174. Invincible time seemed to come to a standstill. The entire universe seemed to have fallen silent. The hand that extended from the spatial crack became the only thing in the world, affecting the minds of everybody. At this moment, all the primordial realm experts gathered there felt like the palm strike with supreme might had sucked away their minds, imprinting the power of the strike within their heads. Whether it was infinite primes or chaotic primes, they were all affected. In the distance, the solitary sword ancestor who sat on a meteor with a sword on his back suddenly stood up. He stared at the palm strike extremely sternly as all the hairs on him pricked up. So powerful. She is one of the greatest experts below Grand Prime after all. She really is terrifying, the solitary sword ancestor thought. He felt helpless before the palm strike even with his strength. Even the onlooking solitary sword ancestor experienced such intense emotions, so the Azure Pung King who directly faced the palm strike was even more shocked. Against the gentle strike that shot over with lightning speed, he felt like he faced heavens, the tremendous, vast, indomitable heavens. He felt insignificant and powerless before it, where he could not put up any resistance at all. The laws within the palm strike were far too powerful. It directly impacted the Azure Pung King's mind, causing him to feel like fate wanted to claim his life, and there was nothing he could do about it. However, the Azure Pung King was still an infamous peak expert of the Saints' world. Azure light exploded in his eyes, and he suppressed the shock within him. As he roared out, a pulse of terrifying energy immediately shot out like a raging flood. He had struck out with his own power of laws. Immediately, the space there collapsed. The Azure Pung King's strike was just too powerful. His full-powered strike without holding anything back was so terrifying that just devastating was not enough to describe its power. All the space as far as the eye could see collapsed from the Azure Pung King's attack, reduced to darkness. Many primordial realm experts and god kings were unable to escape in time, so they became unrelated casualties, sucked away by the Azure Pung King's spatial cracks. Since you want to attack me, you need to pay the consequences. If these people die here, it'll all be because of you, the Azure Pung King roared inside as madness filled his eyes. He did not do this on purpose. His opponent was just too powerful, so he needed to unleash his full strength and hide no power. As a result, the surrounding space collapsed from the energy he had erupted with. The slender hand that had emerged from the spatial crack was completely unaffected by the Azure Pung King's pulse of energy. The gentle-looking hand contained a mysterious power of supremacy. Wherever the hand passed by, the stream of energy from the Azure Pung King would split in half and expand towards the two sides. At that critical moment, the slender hand was unstoppable, landing on the Azure Pung King's chest gently. Spurt! The Azure Pung King immediately paled as blood sprayed out from his mouth. His chest had been completely destroyed, revealing a huge hole as azure scales shot out everywhere. It scattered across space with the Azure Pung King's blood. The Azure Pung King staggered backwards. He stared at the hand from the spatial crack in shock and fear. There was raging fury within his fearful gaze. Without any hesitation, he turned around and fled. He unleashed his full speed, covering millions of kilometers in a single instance, fleeing into the depths of space. He was unbelievably fast. Azure Pung King, the people of the heavenly palace of Bishing cannot be touched by you. I'll teach you a lesson this time. There won't be a second time. A cold voice rang out in the space there. The voice surpassed time and space, reaching the Azure Pung King who had already vanished, booming out in his head clearly. The mysterious expert who dealt the sneak attack did not chase him. Her hand that had basically pierced through the fabric of space and time suddenly shone with dazzling light. As threads, the light plunged into the cracks. It wrapped and pulled out the cultivators who were not powerful enough to escape by themselves from the cracks. In the end, the hand brushed past the space there. With that, the shattered space suddenly began to recover at a much greater rate, returning to its previous state in just a few seconds. Very soon, peace descended on that region of space again. The hand had vanished silently at a certain time, only leaving behind Ming Dong and the Eighth Majesty who stood there unscathed. Even though they were the closest to the Azure Pung King and were located in the center of the energy storm, they surprisingly were not harmed at all. The primordial realm experts and the god kings in the area were all scattered through the surroundings in horrible shapes. When they thought about what had just happened, they became filled with lingering fear. The solitary sword ancestor remained standing on the meteor. When the Azure Pung King struck out earlier, the terrifying energy he had erupted with had already reduced all the meteors in the surroundings to dust. Only the meteor beneath the solitary sword ancestor remained fine, without moving at all. At this moment, the solitary sword ancestor's ancient eyes landed on Ming Dong. He secretly guessed at Ming Dong's identity. Ming Dong is probably far beyond us in terms of status. In the distance, Rue Di and Ji Yi, who were also in horrible shape, stared at Ming Dong with mixed feelings. The First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing only left the Neptunian Divine Palace recently. However, with her speed, she would have already reached an extremely distant region of space by now, yet because of Ming Dong, she ripped through space and intervened. It looks like Ming Dong's status is quite impressive in the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. He's either the Eighth Majesty's disciple or the First Majesty's disciple. Remember, we can never afford to offend this person. Elder Rue Di of the Sect of Dragons and Phoenixes appeared beside Rue Di and Ji Yi as he warned them sternly. I never thought that you actually came from the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. To another side, Princess Yun Xiaoyan of the Thousand Lotus Empire stood with an extremely mixed expression. Although I knew you had extraordinary origins, I never thought you actually came from a place as great as the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. The difference in our statuses is actually this great. Yun Xiaoyan was gloomy. She was in low spirits. Look at you. Look at what you've become. It's just a trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace, yet you've lost half your life. You sure embarrass us, the heavenly palace of Bishing. At the same time, the Eighth Majesty frowned and lectured Ming Dong unhappily. Then she glanced at Yun Xiaoyan in the distance and said to Ming Dong, "Let me take you to see someone. Your karma with her runs deep." Chapter 2175. Running into a disaster, the vast outer space was filled with infinite darkness and coldness. There was no sense of time or direction. It was very easy for people to get lost. Currently, in the deathly silent outer space, a small spaceship moved through there silently like a ghost. It was extremely fast. A young man who only seemed to be in his 20s with a weather-hardened face and a young woman who seemed about the same age as him silently stood in the cockpit. They stared at the space outside. "Jian Chen, where are we going next?" At this moment, the woman asked. She blankly stared at the seemingly unfamiliar space that still gave off a sense of familiarity for some reason, as she seemed lost about the future. "We don't have any star charts, and we don't know where we are right now. The priority is for us to learn where we are before taking action. After all, the vast outer space isn't as tranquil as it seems on the surface. In order to avoid the space beasts that thrive here, we need to be careful to not set foot in zones of danger," said the man as he stared at the outside world. They happened to be Jian Chen and Kai Ya. After the teleportation formation sent out Jian Chen and Xue Yunlan, they arrived in this unfamiliar space. Xue Yunlan did not travel with Jian Chen. She turned down his suggestion of visiting Chongyang Mingyue and left alone. Afterwards, Jian Chen called Kai Ya out from the Anata Tower. Inside a space ring he had obtained from a supreme god king in the Neptunian Divine Palace, he found a small spaceship. As a result, the two of them used it to travel through outer space. The only problem was that they had searched through all the space rings on them and actually found two small spaceships, but they did not find a single star chart. As a result, they were lost in outer space. They could only control the spaceship to fly in one direction in hopes of coming across someone who also hurried through outer space so that they could ask for directions. "It's just a pity that Chanlong has gone missing," Kaya sighed gently. When she thought about the days when the three of them roamed through outer space, she became filled with pity. "Don't worry, he'll be fine. You have to remember that the Neptunian mountains vanished with him," said Jian Chen. However, at this moment, both of their faces changed slightly. Outside, the space that used to be filled with stars completely vanished. The space they now saw was truly empty. There was only eternal darkness and no starlight at all. "Is this a formation?" Jian Chen studied the surroundings as he said sternly. It went without thinking that the formation was very powerful, seeing how it was cast in outer space. However, Jian Chen did not have any mastery over formations at all, so once they were trapped here, they would be in trouble. With a flash, Jian Chen and Kai Ya appeared on the deck outside. The two of them stared at the surroundings sternly. "We have indeed entered a formation. It's just that this formation is extremely tremendous and profound. It's a pity that Chanlong is not present, or we might have been able to find a way out with his mastery over formations," Kaya said grimly. Neither she nor Jian Chen was skilled with formations, so the situation they faced was extremely bad. "Come with me. Let's see if we can leave here somehow." Jian Chen grabbed Kaya's hand and retreated in the direction that they had come from. However, leaving a formation was easier said than done. Moreover, they had no mastery over formations at all. As a result, just a while later, Jian Chen felt like he had completely lost his bearings. He was truly lost. At this moment, a powerful pulse of energy radiated out. Finger-sized streams of dark light suddenly appeared, wrapping towards Jian Chen and Kaya with terrifying killing intent like rain. The light came in from all directions, completely sealing off all of Jian Chen and Kaya's paths of retreat. The power that each stream of light gave off made Jian Chen jump in fright. So many streams together possessed enough power to even kill primordial realm experts. "Quick, enter the tower," Jian Chen called out and took out the Anata tower as quickly as he could. With a flash, the two of them hid inside. Boom, 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 boom. The streaks of light all struck the Anata tower, producing a series of deafening sounds. It also caused the Anata tower to shake. Under the havoc of the powerful ripples of energy, the spaceship parked nearby that had not been stowed away instantly shattered to pieces. Without any hesitation, Jian Chen immediately controlled the Anata Tower to charge out. He hoped that he could charge out of this formation with the toughness of the Anata Tower. I wonder if the owner of this formation is present. If they are, then we have to leave immediately, or there'll be big trouble. I've obtained 3 cosmic movement talismans in the Neptunian Divine Palace, and I only have one left now. I don't want to waste it here, Jian Chen thought as he flew as quickly as he could with the Anata Tower. The Anata Tower endured the most vicious attacks from the formation as it charged through it all. Even though it was still damaged and sealed up by sword qi, preventing it from unleashing its full power, it was still a god artifact of the best quality after all. Just the material it had been built out of was indestructible. As a result, even though the attacks of the formation were extremely ferocious, it failed to do anything to the Anata Tower. Boom! At this moment, a great sound rang out. The Anata Tower struck a spatial barrier and shattered a meteor in there. As the meteor shattered, a crack seemed to appear in the formation as well. Stop! Don't destroy the formation! At this moment, a hoarse, old voice boomed out thunderously. In the next moment, a huge hand completely condensed out of energy reached over with great might, grabbing the Anata Tower and pulling it over. Jian Chen's face changed drastically in the Anata Tower. Wrapped around by the giant hand, he was unable to escape with the Anata Tower. After all, his control over the Anata Tower was still very weak. He was unable to unleash all the power of the tower. Jian Chen's face became extremely ugly as he sighed at his misfortune. He had already realized that he had probably encountered a primordial realm expert, and a very powerful one at that. Boom! The huge hand condensed from energy directly through the Anata Tower at a meteor hidden within the formation. With a rumble, a huge pit was created in the tough meteor as a result of the Anata Tower's terrifying toughness. I know you can hear me. Come out. Don't hide inside. The hoarse old voice rang out again. Even though it was unable to reach within the Anata Tower, Jian Chen was still able to hear it clearly, as he had refined half of the tower. Chapter 2176. Radiant God King, Jian Chen, don't go out. It's safer in here. Once you go out, you won't even be able to escape with your current strength. Kaya grabbed Jian Chen's arm on the first floor of the Anata Tower as she said in worry. Jian Chen looked at Kaya in surprise. You can hear the voice outside? Although the interior and exterior were only separated by a wall, they were 2 different spaces in reality. He could hear the voice outside and sense the activity there because he had refined a portion of the Anata Tower. But how did Kaya know what was happening outside? Jian Chen found this extremely to be bewildering. Yeah. As my strength increased, I started to be able to vaguely sense what's going on outside, said Kaya. In reality, she too was extremely bewildered because she discovered that as her strength rapidly progressed, not only could she sense what was going on outside the tower, but she also found the tower to be more and more familiar. As a matter of fact, she even felt like she had fused with the space in the tower from time to time. Jian Chen found what Kaya said to be strange. If it were a saint artifact of quite a low quality, it would indeed be very difficult for it to block off Kaya's senses as a god king. However, the Anata Tower was not a saint artifact of quite a low quality. It was a god artifact of the highest quality. Even if it was very damaged, it was impossible for Kaya to be able to sense the outside without refining the Anata Tower with her current level of cultivation. Jian Chen could not understand this no matter how he thought. However, it clearly was not the time for him to ponder on this. He said, Kaya, don't worry. Nothing will happen to me. If I really do encounter danger, I'll escape with this cosmic movement talisman. Jian Chen took out the final cosmic movement talisman from his space ring with that. He clenched it in his hand tightly and left the Anata Tower. As soon as he left the Anata Tower, Jian Chen saw an old woman in simple clothes and messy hair that basically covered her face. She stood nearby with her arms on her back. The old woman did not look at Jian Chen. Her knowledgeable eyes were locked onto the damaged Anata Tower as her expression became extremely mixed. Senior, it's you? Jian Chen was surprised as soon as he saw the old woman. He was taken aback. He recognized the old woman who had her presence concealed with a single glance. She was the person who had traded for his damaged god artifact armor back on the spatial battleship. You're actually still alive? The old woman glanced at Jian Chen indifferently. Even though they had only met once in the past, the matter with the damaged god artifact armor made her develop an extremely deep impression of Jian Chen. Then the old woman looked at the Anata tower again. But since you have this, even dying is difficult. Can you tell me where you got this from? Jian Chen knew that the old woman had recognized the Anata tower. However, he did not worry. He clenched the cosmic movement talisman tightly as his vigilance was raised to the limit. He said, I found this tower out of pure coincidence in a zone of danger from a lower world. A lower world, a lower world. This tower actually ended up in a lower world. The old woman murmured as she seemed to be in a trace. She seemed rather lost. After a while of silence, she continued. Was this tower found in the same place as the god artifact armor you traded to me before? They were found in the same world but in different locations, Jian Chen said. Sigh. The old woman exhaled gently when she heard that as bitterness filled her face. She said, It looks like what they said is true. And if it really was like that, then I haven't been hunted down for millions of years for nothing. It wasn't for nothing. Senior, you've been hunted down for millions of years. Jian Chen asked with his tongue tied. The old woman said nothing. She only stood there silently and stared at the Anata tower, at the powerful slashes on its surface. Her gaze was mixed. Senior. Senior. Something has happened, something bad has happened. A crack has appeared in this natural concealing formation. At this moment, a man who seemed to be in his 30s arrived before the old woman in a hurry. He glanced up constantly as his voice was filled with undisguised fear and unease. I know, the old woman said calmly. She also glanced up with gloomy eyes. If the natural concealing formation had shattered because of some other reason, then so be it, but it just so happened to shatter because of this tower. This is the will of the heavens. The will of the heavens. Even the heavens do not want me to hide here comfortably. The old woman's voice was filled with bitterness. What do I do? What do I do? I haven't condensed a soul tree yet. Without this natural concealing formation, I'll probably never be able to escape from that demon. The man was flustered and uneasy as his face was filled with undisguised fear. Suddenly, the man looked at Jian Chen resentfully. He called out angrily, It's all because of you. Why did you have to destroy this formation? Why did you have to come here? You bastard, I'll never spare you. With that, a dazzling milky white light immediately rose up from the young man. It turned into a beam of light that shot towards Jian Chen with a scorching presence. The beam of light moved extremely quickly, and it was blinding. It shot through the air like an aurora, arriving before Jian Chen in a single instance. Radiant Saint Force. Jian Chen's eyes suddenly narrowed as he became extremely shocked. He was a Radiant Saint Master, so he was extremely familiar with Radiant Saint Force. He could tell with a single glance that the white light had been condensed from Radiant Saint Force. However, according to his understanding, Radiant Saint Force was primarily for healing wounds. Its offensive capabilities were extremely weak, and at a similar cultivation, Radiant Saint Masters were not the opponents of cultivators. However, at this moment, the white beam of light condensed from Radiant Saint Force made Jian Chen experience a great sense of danger, and this level of danger had reached the same level as Supreme God Kings. Jian Chen experienced a certain level of threat. Is this another way of using Radiant Saint Force? Jian Chen was extremely overjoyed. He had heard from Fairy Hao Yu back in the lower world that the Radiant Saint Masters of the Saints' world were extremely powerful. It made him develop a sense of anticipation long ago that he could make some more progress as a Radiant Saint Master in the Saints' world. However, Radiant Saint Masters were far rarer in the Saints' world than Jian Chen had expected, so he had not encountered a single one of them despite spending so much time in the Saints' world. Finally, he coincidentally encountered a Radiant God King here today. Jian Chen's heart palpitated as he was filled with undisguisable excitement. He did not choose to avoid the Radiant God King's attack, nor did he choose to counterattack. Instead, he filled his hand with chaotic force before reaching out, using his hand to catch the streak of light that shot over. He actually wanted to use the toughness of his body to forcefully receive the strand of Radiant Saint Force that was equivalent to an attack from a Supreme God King. At that critical moment, the beam of white light struck Jian Chen's hand with great force, immediately producing a heavy thud. Jian Chen trembled violently as he took a step back uncontrollably. His hand had become bloodied, and intense pain descended on him. This power. So powerful. On the surface, it's another way to use Radiant Saint Force, but it's actually a power that is completely different from Radiant Saint Force. It's a different type of law, Chen paid no attention to his wounds. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to comprehend the power seriously. The reason why he had used his hand to receive the attack was to come into contact with the power in the most direct method possible. He wanted to try and see the power with even more clarity and understand the power's characteristics. Although Chen was unable to grasp this power immediately from just that, he gained an understanding towards the power, allowing him to see a path forward. But this law is rather special. It can basically be called the upgraded version of Radiant Saint Force because grasping this power requires you to be a Radiant Saint Master, thought Chen. Chen was overjoyed from this discovery. He became tempted to comprehend the law as soon as possible. This was because he had not made any progress on his Radiant Saint Force for a very long time. It remained at Class 9. On the Tianyuan continent, Class 9 Radiant Saint Masters were peak experts, but in the Saints' world, they were completely useless. Their superior healing abilities were of no use to Chen, who had already become a God King. This was because the power was at too low of a level. It was not that Chen did not want to make further progress as a Radiant Saint Master. He just did not have the following cultivation method. Afterwards, the Radiant God King immediately became dumbstruck when he saw Chen stop his attack with just his hand. He could not help but sigh in amazement. What a tough body! But soon afterwards, he began to scowl once again. He wanted to continue attacking Chen, clearly showing no intentions of sparing Chen like this. Sigh! The old woman exhaled softly. She said, "Enough." The destruction of the formation doesn't have much to do with him. It's the will of the heavens. The heavens don't want me to be safe. Speaking of which, I've dragged you into this mess as well. If I didn't hide here, maybe they wouldn't pass by coincidentally and destroy the natural concealing formation here. The old woman looked at the damaged Anata Tower. She did not think it was all a coincidence. Rather, she believed that it was fate. Senior, Junior does not understand. The Radiant God King clearly answered to the old woman's beck and call. He immediately stopped attacking Chen and stared at the old woman in confusion. Chen also stared at the old woman doubtfully. Her gaze remained locked on the Anata Tower, and she seemed amazed. Perhaps, not only did she recognize the tower, but she even had an unknown connection with the tower as well? Senior, do you know the master of this tower? Chen clasped his fist and asked carefully. The old woman's expression became extremely complicated when she heard that. She sighed emotionally. Speaking of it, the master of this tower is my grandmaster. However, I've never seen this supreme grandmaster before. What? The master of this tower is Senior's grandmaster? Chen was taken aback as disbelief filled his face. He had never thought that the old woman was actually the grand disciple of the Anata Grand Prime. The old woman stared at Chen deeply. Looking at your reaction, you must know the origins of this tower already. Chen nodded and did not lie. Since Senior is the grand disciple of this tower's master, may I ask if Senior will be taking the tower back? Chen clenched the cosmic movement talisman tightly. He said that to test the old woman. He had already been mentally prepared to immediately flee with the Anata Tower once something felt off. The origins of this tower are just far too great. It's not something that other people can try to possess. Once I become interested in possessing it, I won't be able to avoid death even if I flee to the ends of the world. The old woman was depressed. She was in indescribable sorrow. In name, I'm his grand disciple, and my status should be extremely great in the saints' world. I would have infinite glory, and there would basically be no one who would want to offend me. But in reality, I've been hunted down for millions of years, and I'm still running desperately now. Do you know where the people who are hunting me down come from? The old woman asked in low spirits. When she thought about her years on the run, she was filled with indescribable bitterness. Are they from the heavenly palace of Bisheng? Chen replied with a question. He already had a general idea of the reason now. The old woman was probably Taji's disciple. That's right. The people who have hunted me down for millions of years are the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. The reason why they're hunting me down is because my master, Taji, betrayed my grandmaster. They say that my master has been working with outsiders to cause harm to my grandmaster. So I was also drawn into this matter because of my master becoming a target for them. Originally, I refused to believe this. I did not believe my master would betray my grandmaster either. After all, My Grandmaster is a famed sovereign of the Saints' world, one of the strongest people in the entire universe. Was there anyone who dared to turn against him? Only when I learnt that my master's armor ended up in the same world as Grandmaster's famed treasure was I forced to believe it, the old woman said slowly. But fortunately, the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing never reached the same agreement about hunting me down, or I wouldn't have survived until now. Only Jian Chen could hear the old woman's words. The radiant god king beside her only saw her lips move, but he heard nothing. Clearly, because Jian Chen was in possession of the Anata Tower, the old woman told him everything. In the eyes of the old woman, the radiant god king had no right to learn about this. With that, Jian Chen understood that the natural concealing formation he had accidentally barged into was probably an extremely powerful formation. Not only could the old woman avoid being hunted down by the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing, but she could also avoid being found by supreme experts or people with various secret techniques or abilities. The meteor that he had accidentally struck with the Anata Tower earlier was extremely likely to be an important component of the concealing formation. Once it had been destroyed, the natural formation had become flawed. A crack had appeared, allowing the old woman to be hunted down by the divine generals again. The radiant god king probably hid there as well to avoid being hunted down for some reason. Senior, we entered this formation accidentally. We had no intention of destroying the formation. It was purely a coincidence, so I hope Senior that can forgive us for the trouble we've caused, Jian Chen said apologetically after he understood why everything had happened. It's the will of the heavens. This isn't your fault, the old woman waved her hand and said rather powerlessly. She gazed at the gloomy sky above her with her eyes that had seen many things. Deep exhaustion was present within them. I could even be found when I hid here. Fate cannot be denied. Fate cannot be denied. Since the heavens want me to die, and the heavens want me to pay for my master's crimes, then I'll hand my damned life to you. I'm tired of a life where I can only hide as well. The old woman's voice was filled with a deep sense of powerlessness as the faint presence of death wrapped around her. Is there any reason to be happy about being alive? Is there any reason to fear death? Ha 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 ha. The old woman suddenly laughed aloud. At that moment, she no longer cared about her life anymore. Senior, don't be too pessimistic. Didn't you say that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing were not in agreement about hunting you down? If that's the case, I don't think it's impossible to fix this matter, said Jian Chen. Fix it? How would you fix it? If you could fix it, why was I hunted down for all these years, heavily injured many times, where I was only a step away from death? Even my cultivation realm has regressed from chaotic prime to infinite prime because my wounds were too heavy, the old woman said in a chilling fashion. Afterwards, she seemed to lose all her power, leaving in low spirits. Jian Chen remained silent when he looked at the lonely figure of the old woman. It's all because of your fault. Now you've done it. Not only is Senior Su doomed because of you, but even I'm doomed because of you. The radiant god king sat on his bottom after the old woman had left and stared at Jian Chen as he sighed. He did not continue to attack Jian Chen. From the attack earlier, he could already tell that he was not Jian Chen's opponent. I am Jian Chen. May I ask how I may refer to you, friend? Jian Chen stowed the Anata Tower away and walked out of the huge pit created by the tower. He clasped his fist towards the radiant god king. Humph, who's your friend? The radiant god king snorted coldly. He resented Jian Chen. Without saying much, he turned around and left. Shen Ming, if you want to hide from that person you speak of, you can hide in the tower. As long as you're in that tower, your presence will vanish from the surroundings completely. It'll be impossible to find your existence whether it's through forecasting or secret techniques. At this moment, the old woman's voice rang out from the distance. The radiant god king froze when he heard that. His ashen face immediately regained its brightness from before as he ravished in joy. He seemed to see a ray of hope in the darkness he faced after he heard the old woman's words. He had become hopefully again. Suddenly, he turned around and pleaded to Jian Chen eagerly. See, can you let me hide in that tower for a while? Once I break through from being a radiant god king and condense my soul tree, I'll leave immediately. He paused there before continuing. If you help me out, I'll owe you my life. I will definitely do everything I can do to help you if I am of any use in the future. Even though I, Shen Ming, possess a low cultivation, I still have my father. My father is one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. As soon as he mentioned his father, pride filled Xianming's face. Jian Chen looked at the Radiant God King in surprise. He had never thought that the Radiant God King would have such a great background, where his father was actually one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall. Although he did not know what level of strength the Radiant Saint Hall possessed, he could naturally tell that the Radiant Saint Hall was quite powerful since a Radiant God King could talk about it so proudly. It's not impossible to let you hide in my tower. However, I need to know who you've offended, Jian Chen purposefully said calmly. He had no idea how he should ask about Radiant Saint Masters from Xianming, but it was great now. Xianming had actually come to him, which was in his favor. Xianming immediately became overjoyed when he saw Jian Chen agree. However, when he heard what Jian Chen said at the end, he immediately appeared innocent. I haven't offended anyone, nor have I provoked anyone. There's just a terrifyingly powerful great demon that has become fixated on us Radiant God Kings. A great demon? Jian Chen felt doubt. That's right, a great demon. This great demon appeared suddenly in the past few hundreds of thousand years. He's extraordinarily powerful and specifically hunts down Radiant God Kings. No matter how safe the location where these Radiant God Kings hide are, they still can't escape from him in the end. In the past few years, who knows how many Radiant God Kings have died to his hands. Even I was forced to leave the Radiant Saint Hall in order to avoid this great demon. I planned on hiding in a remote region at the boundary of the Saint's world. But out of pure coincidence, I accidentally entered this natural concealing formation when I passed through this region. When I sensed how powerful this concealing formation was, I just opened a dwelling here and began cultivating here in an attempt to condense a soul tree. I was the first person who arrived here. I stayed here for several 100,000 years. As for Senior Su, she only found this place in the recent few years. Originally, this place was the best hiding place for Senior Su and me because this concealing formation was created naturally, so it could hide the heavenly secrets and render all methods and secret techniques useless. In the end, it was destroyed because you came here. Jian Chen laughed dryly. He changed the topic. What kind of strength does your Radiant Saint Hall possess in comparison to the other organizations in the Saint's world? Isn't your father able to protect you as one of the 8 vice leaders? Xianming sighed. Our Radiant Saint Hall is a peak organization in the Saint's world. As one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, he's naturally an expert. However, the great demon's strength is just too terrifying. He even heavily injured the leader of our Radiant Saint Hall. My father naturally doesn't have the ability to protect me, so I could only leave the Radiant Saint Hall. Xianming seemed to think of a terrifying scene of the past when he mentioned this. He showed deep fear in his eyes. I never thought that this person would actually be so powerful, where he can hold off the Radiant Saint Hall, a peak organization, all by himself. What I don't understand is why such a powerful expert will lower himself to attack these Radiant God Kings. Perhaps he has some irresolvable grievance with your Radiant Saint Hall? Jian Chen asked with much confusion. However, Xianming shook his head to deny it without any hesitation whatsoever. Although I don't know why this great demon is targeting us Radiant God Kings, there is one thing I am certain about. The great demon does not hold deep hatred towards our Radiant Saint Hall. If he really has grievances, he can make our Radiant Saint Hall suffer unimaginable losses with his unrivaled strength. However, he hasn't done that. If you put it like that, this is quite strange. Has he been targeting Radiant God Kings specifically for other reasons? Jian Chen murmured. I don't know about that. Anyway, all the Radiant God Kings from our Radiant Saint Hall have been in a constant state of anxiety due to the great demon. They've all begun to flee the Radiant Saint Hall and hide in various places, afraid that the great demon would find them. However, even with that being the case, the great demon still found many hidden Radiant God Kings and murdered them. Who knows if this great demon has lost his mind or not? He specifically targets peak Radiant God Kings who are about to condense soul trees. Even when people of other cultivation realms are presented before the great demon, he would not even glance at them. I've reached the peak of Radiant God King long ago, and I'm about to condense my soul tree. Condensing a soul tree is akin to your infinite prime. It's anything but easy to go from being a God King to an infinite prime. Moreover, we Radiant God Kings experience a difficulty several times greater than going from God King to infinite prime for you due to the unique laws we comprehend, Xianming said in low spirits. As a result, you hid here for several 100,000 years, and you remained as a Radiant God King? Jian Chen asked. He learnt an extremely important piece of information from Xian Min. It was more difficult for Radiant Saint Masters to break through compared to fighters. It's not because of my talent. Instead, it's because of the formation. If there are benefits, there are also downsides. The formation can conceal the heavenly secrets and render all methods of forecasting useless, allowing me to live safely. However, it's also because of its existence that the heavenly secrets have been cut off, interfering with the laws, so comprehension became several times more difficult in the formation, preventing me from breaking through the entire time. I dare not go outside without condensing a soul tree. Although a very long time has passed, no one can guarantee that the great demon will not suddenly come for me. In order to gain Jian Chen's trust and assistance, Xian Ming said a lot. He explained everything thoroughly, hiding nothing from Jian Chen. This was because he knew that he could only survive by relying on Jian Chen. Although he had no idea how the damaged tower covered in sword slashes could be extraordinary, he firmly believed what Senior Su had said. Jian Chen, the concealing formation is damaged and can probably no longer obscure the heavenly secrets. Do you think I can go in now? I'm afraid that the great demon will discover me if I stay out for too long. Although this place is far enough from the Radiant Saint Hall, you need to know that a peak expert like the great demon tends to have many methods. Xian Ming looked at Jian Chen hopefully, unwilling to show any resentment towards Jian Chen anymore. Jian Chen smiled slightly. Of course you can. I'm just curious about a lot of things about Radiant Saint Masters, so I might need your guidance in some knowledge about Radiant Saint Masters in the future. At that time, I hope that Brother Xian Ming would be willing to enlighten me. Xian Ming was overjoyed. No problem. It's no problem at all. Of course, it's not a problem. As long as it isn't the secrets of our Radiant Saint Hall, everything and anything is fine. Afterwards, Jian Chen took out the Anata Tower and let the impatient Xian Ming in. Heavens! What a large miniature world. Jian Chen, the quality of this tower must be impressive. Ah! What terrifying sword chi. There's actually a large region of space that has shattered up ahead. Just how vast is this miniature world? I can actually comprehend laws without any obstructions at all here, unlike in the concealing formation where I felt like I was peering through mist. I can swear that as long as I cultivate in an environment like this, the bottleneck to condensing a soul tree won't be able to keep me trapped for much longer. Xian Ming exclaimed as soon as he entered the Anata Tower. Jian Chen shook his head with a smile as he listened to Xian Ming's voice. His gaze towards the damaged tower became mixed. He had exposed the Anata Tower several times in the Neptunian Divine Palace. Although the Supreme God Kings could not recognize it with their knowledge, he knew that once the experts behind them heard about the tower's appearance and power, it would be extremely likely that they would be able to guess what the tower was. This was extremely bad for him. After all, these people were not like the old woman, who had no interest in possessing the Anata Tower. I probably can't keep this tower for much longer, Jian Chen murmured. The artifact spirit of the Neptunian Divine Palace was right. The Anata Tower was an object of desire. Although he had brought it up from a lower world, it did not belong to him. It would still return to the heavenly palace of Bixing in the end. This was because he had nowhere near enough strength to keep the Anata Tower. Jian Chen, I feel like this place isn't as simple as it seems on the surface. At this moment, Kaya emerged from the Anata Tower. She said sternly as she studied the surroundings seriously. Jian Chen's face hardened when he heard that. He looked at Kaya with shining eyes. Kaya, what have you discovered? Can you sense a faint, desolate presence in the surroundings? This presence seems to be extremely ancient, with a presence of time as if it holds endless history. Kaya closed her eyes and sensed the surroundings carefully as she said to Jian Chen softly. Jian Chen also closed his eyes and sensed carefully, but in the end, he shook his head. He sensed nothing. The presence is too thin. It seems like it has merged with the space, becoming part of the surroundings. Kaya continued. Then she paused and said, and I have an extremely strange feeling that is telling me that this concealing formation in outer space is not natural but cast down by someone. What did you say? Jian Chen's face immediately changed as he exclaimed from what Kaya had said at the end. He thought of the old woman. The old woman was a grand disciple of the Anata Grand Prime, and she herself was a powerful primordial realm expert. Both her knowledge and insight were extremely broad, yet even she insisted that the formation was natural. How did Kaya conclude it was man-made? My instincts are telling me that this formation is not natural but cast down by someone, Kaya affirmed. Jian Chen looked at Kaya silently. Were Kaya's instincts even greater than the old woman's knowledge and insight? But in the next moment, Jian Chen's face suddenly changed. He could not help but clutch his chest as confusion and surprise flooded his face. Jian Chen, what's wrong? Kaya immediately supported Jian Chen and became concerned when she sensed Jian Chen's abnormal behavior. The power of the ancient sky wolf's bloodline within my body has suddenly acted up. It has broken free from my control slightly, Jian Chen said grimly. A smear of wonder appeared in Kaya's eyes. She stared at Jian Chen, and after a moment of silence she said in doubt, "Do you think how the bloodline of the ancient sky wolf is acting up suddenly has something to do with this place? It can't be, right?" Jian Chen shook his head as he struggled to believe Kaya's guess. However, just when Jian Chen said that, his eyes suddenly narrowed. Surprise filled his face. He turned his head towards the distance and said, "Through the power of the bloodline within me, I can vaguely sense a calling. The calling originates from up ahead." Jian Chen's eyes shone extremely brightly. They were sparkling. He stared at the place that was calling towards him as he showed both surprise and doubt. "Is it really like what you said, that how the bloodline of the ancient sky wolf has suddenly acted up is related to this place?" "Let's go over and have a look first," said Kaya. She was also curious. Afterwards, the two of them no longer remained where they were. Immediately, they approached the place that seemed to be calling towards Jian Chen. The meteor was very large, but Kaya and Jian Chen were both god kings after all. With their speed, they only took a short while to arrive where the calling was coming from. It was an empty plot of land. The place was deathly silent as far as the eyes could see. There was no vegetation, making it barren. "Is it here?" Kaya studied the surroundings and asked Jian Chen. Jian Chen said nothing. He glanced around at the surroundings before closing his eyes. He sensed through the power of the bloodline to search for where the calling came from. "It's right here, right beneath my feet." Jian Chen opened his eyes and looked at the tough rock beneath him. The senses of his soul immediately radiated out, piercing the ground as an invisible sword. However, when the senses of his soul reached a few thousand meters deep, a mysterious power obstructed it, and it could no longer travel any further. "There seems to be a formation below the ground," said Kaya. Clearly, she had also probed the situation underground with the senses of her soul. "Let's open up a path," Jian Chen said firmly. He took out the 9-star sword of heavenly ways. As he poured chaotic force into the god artifact, the sword immediately shone with a light that seemed to come from stars. Jian Chen swung it and directly struck the ground in an exampt to open up a hole. Boom! With a deafening sound, the tough rock beneath Jian Chen immediately shattered. Loose rubble shot off in all directions, exposing a pit that was over 10 meters deep. The meteor was extremely tough. Jian Chen's strike was enough to cleave a normal meteorite several tens of thousand meters across in half, yet he only managed to create a pit here. "Jian Chen, let me help you." Kaya took action as well. The laws of destruction descended. Like threads, the laws struck the ground one after another. Immediately, deafening booms constantly rang out. Under Jian Chen and Kaya's combined attacks, the ground shook violently. Web-like cracks appeared as dust filled the surroundings like a dense mist. Under their continuous attacks that were on par with attacks of supreme god kings, the tunnel rapidly deepened. But the deeper they went, the tougher the rock became. As a result, as the tunnel grew longer, their advance became slower and slower. In the end, it took Jian Chen and Kaya 3 days to dig a hole that was several thousand meters deep. They saw the formation hidden beneath the ground. Before them, there was a simple stone door that seemed to have existed since time immemorial. It was like it had existed through all ages. The formations engraved on the door were extremely profound. They seemed to contain the truths of the world and hid endless mysteries. It also gave off a terrifying killing intent that sent chills running down spines. Kaya stared at the formation on the stone door closely as she became stern. She said grimly, "I can sense that this formation is very terrifying. It's extremely terrifying. It's countless times more terrifying than the formation we encountered earlier." Jian Chen stared at the simple stone door ahead as he remained silent. He stood before the stone door, and the power of the ancient sky wolf's bloodline seemed to bubble. Not only did it act up with great intensity, giving off a burning presence, but it even seemed like it wanted to break free from his control and burst out of his body. The activity of the power of the bloodline allowed Jian Chen to confirm that this place was either related to the ancient Skywolf, or there was something that could call the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline from afar behind the stone door. From how profound the formation on the stone door seems, the concealing formation outside really might not have been naturally created. Instead, it might have been personally cast down by a peak expert who had reached the limits of cultivation. However, what I don't understand is why a killing formation of a clearly lower level appear in this powerful concealing formation. Jian Chen asked in confusion. He could still remember that he and Kaya had been forced into the Anatta Tower by a killing formation as soon as they had entered the concealing formation. The killing formation was indeed very powerful, but it could not kill infinite primes at all. Compared to the concealing formation that could obscure the heavenly secrets and render the searching methods of peak experts useless, they were on two completely different levels. Because that killing formation was set up by Xian Ming in the past, at this moment, an old voice rang out from behind. The old woman had appeared behind Jian Chen and Kaya at a certain time, hovering there silently. As one of the 8 vice leaders of the Radiant Saint Hall, Xian Ming's father gave Xian Ming many items to save his life. The killing formation you encountered in the concealing formation was cast down by Xian Ming through a formation disc. It was to prevent outsiders from entering this place, explained the old woman. Then she looked at Kaya and said, "Girl, it looks like you are anything but simple. Even I could not see through the secrets of this concealing formation, making me believe it was formed naturally the entire time, yet you saw through it with a single glance." "You overpraise me, senior. Junior only had a gut feeling," Kaya replied modestly. The old woman looked at Kaya deeply and said, "If it really was a gut feeling, your gut feelings are far too terrifying." Jian Chen coughed gently and pointed at the stone door. He changed the topic of the conversation. "Senior, let's study this stone door instead. Does Senior have any way to get through the formations on this stone door?" The old woman sighed gently. "Let's go. Let's leave here. Don't eye the stone door. Although I too am interested in the secret behind the stone door very much, this stone door is not something we can touch because the formation on it makes even me shiver in fear. If I've seen correctly, the formation should come from a Grand Exalt. Only a Grand Exalt, someone who has become an existence equivalent to laws and can twist the laws to their whim, can cast a concealing formation to the level where it would seem like it had formed naturally. This formation cannot be broken. Those who try will die." The old woman stared at the stone door and said extremely sternly. With that, she turned around and left. Jian Chen did not plan on leaving. He stared at the stone door quietly, and after hesitating for a while, he made up his mind in the end and let go of the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline within him. Without Jian Chen's restraints, the power immediately turned into a blood-red light and shot out of Jian Chen's body towards the stone door. When the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline came in contact with the formation on the stone door, it immediately seeped in. At the same time, the Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door immediately erupted with blinding light. At that moment, the tremendous energy hidden within the formation seemed to have been awakened. As it surged, the entire meteor rumbled violently as it gave off a devastating presence. "Who let you act recklessly?" Nearby, the old woman's face suddenly changed. She looked back at Jian Chen and Kaya and called out to them. She looked at the simple stone door in undisguised fear, and with a flash, she arrived behind Jian Chen and Kaya. She grabbed them by the shoulders and was ready to leave as quickly as possible. However, in the next moment, the old woman's movements halted. Surprise filled her old face, and she immediately stared at the stone door with shining eyes. Under the surging pulses of energy, the Grand Exalt's formation on the stone door began to part slowly. In just a while, the Grand Exalt's formation that struck fear into the old woman's heart had completely vanished. Only a droplet of bright red blood hovered there. "What's this all about?" This development stunned the old woman. She stared at the blood deeply and said, "Where did you get this droplet of blood from?" "This is the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline. I obtained it accidentally on the spatial battleship I was on with Senior," Jian Chen said. He already understood that the old woman was not someone who harbored evil intentions, so he trusted the old woman to a certain degree. "It's actually the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline," the old woman sighed in surprise. She stared at the simple stone door that seemed to have existed since time immemorial and said to herself, "Maybe this place was left behind by the past Grand Exalt, the ancient Skywolf?" Or maybe this is where the ancient sky wolf passed away in meditation. Senior, the ancient sky wolf is a past Grand Exalt? Jian Chen was surprised. Just as the name suggested, past Grand Exalts were naturally Grand Exalts who appeared in the past. They no longer existed. The old woman clearly knew some secret rumors about Grand Exalts. She said slowly, "That's right. The ancient sky wolf is indeed a Grand Exalt that appeared in history. The time when he existed was before the 7 Grand Exalts, in an aeon far earlier. From the moment the saint's world was created till now, probably no one knows how long it has existed for apart from peak experts like Grand Exalts. This endless period of time has been split into many eons. Who knows how many eons it has already been? But according to my knowledge, the aeon before the 7 Grand Exalts was the ancient Skywolf's aeon. Only when all the peak experts of that aeon died did the aeon of the 7 Grand Exalts begin. In other words, there have been many Grand Exalts in the saint's world across all this time," Jian Chen sighed emotionally. "Naturally. Who knows how many eons have passed already in the saint's world? There are Grand Exalts in every aeon." Memories flooded the old woman's eyes as she murmured, "Many years ago when I was beside my master, I was fortunate enough to see the First Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bishing. I remember that the First Majesty said something to my master back then. She said that although the saint's world has been through many eons, it's impossible for the number of Grand Exalts in a single major world to exceed 10 for every aeon." When she reached there, the woman scoffed. "People say that once you reach godhood, you break free from the limitations of age and gain eternal life, allowing you to become as old as the world. But in reality, no one can truly attain eternal life. Even the Grand Exalts who comprehend laws to the limit and literally become an embodiment of laws themselves can also die. For example, in that battle 3 million years ago, the 7 Grand Exalts still died or became injured. Even my Grandmaster, the Unata Grand Prime, met his end. Even Grand Exalts are unable to truly attain eternal life, let alone the people below Grand Exalt. What eternal life? What becoming as old as the world? In my eyes, it's all a joke." Towards the end, the old woman laughed crazily as if she had managed to see through life and death. Was there any reason to be happy about being alive? Was there any reason to fear death? At this moment, Jian Chen had arrived before the simple stone door. He pushed the heavy door open slowly. Immediately, a dense and pure presence of desolation surged out. It contained the presence of the laws of the world. As Jian Chen was at the very front, this presence struck him first, causing his mind to shudder. As the presence brushed past him, he immediately felt like he had fused with the world. He closed his eyes and seemed to be able to see the 3,000 ways that had woven into a net, allowing him to sense them all. He reached out and seemed to be able to clutch them firmly. It felt like he could grasp them. The old woman's mind also shuddered. Surprise filled her voice as she cried out uncontrollably, Is this the legendary origin of ways?" The old woman's expression was extremely complicated. Unlike Jian Chen, she knew exactly how precious and rare the origin of ways was. It was a treasure that could even lead to bloodshed between Grand Primes. The old woman immediately closed her eyes. She tried to comprehend it to the best of her efforts, to absorb the origin of ways. At the same time, Kaya could not help but close her eyes as well. She began to absorb the origin of ways that surged out of the stone door. At this moment, even Kaya herself failed to realize that a black hole had silently appeared in the depths of her sea of consciousness. As soon as the origin of ways entered her body, it surged into the black hole and completely vanished. Ever since the black hole appeared, Kaya absorbed more than half of the origin of ways that had surged out of the stone door. Even Jian Chen and the old woman's combined efforts were not enough to match Kaya. The origin of ways. It's actually the origin of ways. Qing Sua, wake up quick! The sword spirits that had been slumbering for quite some time in Jian Chen's body were alarmed. It really is the origin of ways. This is something left behind when Grand Exalts pass away in meditation, and their souls return to the world. It's one of the most precious things in the world. Ziying sees it all. Afterwards, the sword spirits also took action. Hidden within Jian Chen's body, the sword spirits turned into yin and yang qi as they revolved around each other like a yin and yang symbol. As they revolved, a suction immediately appeared, rapidly drawing in the origin of ways. With the sword spirit's assistance, the origin of ways that surged into Jian Chen increased by several times over. Under their combined efforts, He managed to absorb 35% of the origin of ways. Kaya absorbed half of it all by herself, while the old woman only managed to absorb 15% in the end. At this moment, the three of them could not help but enter a selfless state as the origin of ways brushed past them. They became submerged in the comprehension of the laws. As a result, none of them realized just how much of the origin of ways the others had absorbed. At this same time, near the Henio plain distant from where Jian Chen and the others were, the majestic Neptunian divine palace stood there quietly like a primordial beast. Although it had already been several days since the Neptunian divine palace had closed, not all of the experts there had left. However, only 30% remained compared to before. These people gathered before the Neptunian divine palace, maintaining a great distance from the structure. They were either calm, or they stared at the Neptunian divine palace in uncertainty. They did not seem like they planned on leaving. A huge meteor hovered near these people. The solitary sword ancestor with a sword on his back sat on it. He was also waiting there. I come from the Xiangyun clan of the Lone Heaven Plain. I represent the Xiangyun clan in hopes of meeting the master of the Neptunian divine palace. I am the current person in charge of the Tianhe clan from the God-Barren Plain. I hope I can meet the new master of the Neptunian divine palace and get to know the new master. We come from planet Violet Brilliance of the 81 Great Planets. Similar voices rang out constantly. The people who remained in the area came from large organizations from various places. They learnt that the new master of the Neptunian divine palace was young and possessed a weaker level of cultivation, so they wanted to take advantage of the situation and provide her with assistance so that they could establish ties with her, or even rope her to their side. However, the Neptunian divine palace did not respond at all. The artifact spirit did not respond to their requests. However, these esteemed experts with impressive strength did not become impatient. They waited outside quietly and calmly. Clearly, after Xiao Man became the new master of the Neptunian divine palace, she had become one of the most desired people in the current saints' world. At this moment, the Neptunian divine palace suddenly shone with a dazzling blue light, which made it seem like an ocean that floated in outer space. As this blue light surrounded the Neptunian divine palace, it shot off into the depths of outer space as a streak of light. Many of the experts secretly sighed when they saw this. They did not pursue the divine palace because they knew that they had already lost their chance to befriend the new master. However, not everyone was like that. At this moment, an ancient sword shot through the air and shattered space as it shone brightly. It destroyed the path that the Neptunian divine palace had to pass through, forcing it to a halt. At a certain time, the solitary sword ancestor who originally sat on the meteor had appeared before the Neptunian divine palace. He held his sword as he blocked the structure's way. "Old man, you're blocking my way. What do you want?" The artifact spirit of the Neptunian divine palace appeared. He stood on top of the divine hall with his short stature. He roared at the solitary sword ancestor as he pointed at him. "My disciple's corpse is still in the Neptunian divine palace. This is my disciple's presence. Hand the person over, and I'll leave immediately," the solitary sword ancestor said emotionlessly. With a wave of his hand, a presence that belonged to Gongzhang appeared before the artifact spirit. After sensing the presence silently, the artifact spirit snorted impatiently. "Here's your disciple. Take him and get out of the way." As he said that, a disheveled corpse in tattered clothes flew out of the Neptunian divine palace. Afterwards, the Neptunian divine palace directly shot off and disappeared into the depths of the vast cosmos. The solitary sword ancestor looked at Gong Zheng's corpse as he showed sorrow. He extended a finger towards Gong Zheng's forehead and used a secret technique. Immediately, the scene before Gong Zheng died clearly appeared in the solitary sword ancestor's mind. He personally saw a god artifact shining with starlight stab into Gong Zheng's head with lightning speed. Does anyone recognize this person? The solitary sword ancestor's eyes were cold. He extended a finger at the empty space, and Jian Chen's face immediately appeared with great clarity. "It's Jian Chen. He's Jian Chen." Immediately, a few supreme god kings who remained beside their seniors and still had not left called out. "He's Jian Chen? That person who helped the girl the entire time in the Neptunian divine palace?" At this moment, even the seniors beside the supreme god kings were stunned. They were taken aback. "Leave Jian Chen behind." The solitary sword ancestor bellowed out as killing intent surged from him. He turned into a resplendent streak of light as he pursued the Neptunian divine palace. The great perfection of sword spirit. I never thought I'd reach the great perfection of sword spirit so soon. Jian Chen opened his eyes slowly. His gaze contained undisguised joy as well as excitement. Several years ago, he had reached the major achievement of sword spirit in the Neptunian divine palace, allowing his chaotic body to reach the 12th layer and him to become a god king. Originally, he believed that it would definitely take an extremely lengthy period of time for him to break through again and reach the great perfection of sword spirit. However, he had never thought that after just a few years, he would break through again with his way of the sword and reach the great perfection of sword spirit. It was like a wish come true. Not only was the great perfection of sword spirit enough for Jian Chen to condense a fourth strand of profound sword qi, but even his chaotic body could formally advance to major achievement. The 13th layer of the chaotic body was major achievement, and the layers after that, the 14th, the 15th all the way until the 18th, were all a part of major achievement. Beyond the 18th layer was the great perfection of the chaotic body. No one had ever reached it throughout history. The cultivation resources on me right now are plentiful. I have several tens of million fire divine crystals, 2 god-tier heavenly resources of unknown grades from the Grand Prime Space Ring, the harvests from the Divine Medicinal Garden, and resources from the space rings of many supreme god kings. These resources should be enough for me to reach the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Jian Chen was eager. He had collected over 100 million fire divine crystals in the Neptunian divine palace. Even after he had given most of them to his sister, there were still several tens of million left. Jian Chen, you've finally awoken, Kai Ya's voice rang out from behind. Jian Chen dismissed his thoughts when he heard that. He looked back and discovered that Kai Ya and the old woman had already awakened. They stood nearby and stared at him. How long have I been comprehending? Jian Chen asked before looking at Kai Ya. He discovered that Kai Ya had already reached the peak of mid-god king now. Kai Ya's progress surprised Jian Chen very much. After all, when Kai Ya had been cultivating in the Tian Yuan clan before, her rate of advance was just startling. It could be said that Kai Ya went from the origin realm to over-god in a single stroke. Yet, he discovered that Kai Ya's cultivation speed had decreased dramatically after becoming a god king, which left him perplexed. Kai Ya glanced at the old woman before saying to Jian Chen, I was the first to awaken. If we go from when I roused, you've been comprehending for a month. Little brother, it looks like your luck is pretty impressive to be able to find something as precious as the origin of ways. Even I've benefited from you. Not only have I completely recovered from my injuries through the origin of ways, but my comprehension of laws has deepened as well. The old woman looked at Jian Chen with mixed emotions. The origin of ways? Senior, was the presence before the origin of ways? Jian Chen asked out of curiosity. That's right. It was the origin of ways. The origin of ways is extremely precious in the saints' world, so precious that even grand primes would be willing to go as far as shed blood for it. This is because the origin ways comes from when sovereigns of the world who had comprehended to the limits of laws pass away in meditation. The origin of ways is condensed from their cultivation, a crystallization of laws. Only those who have not reached the level of grand exalts can benefit greatly when they absorb the origin of ways. There are 2 ways for grand exalts to die. One of them is for them to die in battle against similar experts. All grand exalts who pass away like this will not leave behind the origin of ways. The other way is for them to pass away in meditation like the ancient Skywolf, where they vanish from the world. Only when grand exalts pass away in meditation like the ancient Skywolf would they leave behind the origin of ways, the old woman explained to Jian Chen at a steady pace. Then she looked at Jian Chen with shining eyes. Do you understand how precious the origin of ways is now? So that's how the origin of ways comes about. Jian Chen was perturbed. He stared at the stone doorway with mixed feelings and said, I never thought that this would be where the ancient Skywolf passed away. Jian Chen sighed gently. He deeply bowed towards the simple, stone doorway out of respect. Only then did he go through it. After stepping through the doorway, Jian Chen immediately felt like he had left the saint's world and come to an alternative space. He knew that the stone doorway was like a tunnel through space. The moment he strode through it, he had entered a miniature world. Jian Chen studied the surroundings and discovered that the miniature world was not large. It was rather empty. Apart from the small wooden hut encased by a barrier at the end of the world, there was only a droplet of blood that hovered in the center. The blood was the size of a thumb. It hovered there silently like a ruby. When Jian Chen saw the droplet of blood, his mind immediately shuddered as his eyes narrowed. This was because he could feel a tremendous energy within the droplet of blood, causing the inconspicuous blood to possess devastating energy. This droplet of blood should be the ancient sky wolf's essence blood. Only grand exalts, sovereigns of the world that embody the very laws themselves, can leave behind a droplet of essence blood that remains just as powerful as before even after who knows how long. The old woman and Kaya also arrived. The old woman stared at the droplet of blood extremely sternly and said in thought, "The energy in the blood is enough to frighten even me. If it erupts, probably even peak chaotic primes can't survive. Be careful. Don't touch the blood." However, before the old woman had finished speaking, the droplet of frightening blood suddenly shook gently. Afterwards, under the shocked gaze of the old woman, the blood gradually approached the power of the bloodline that had come from Jian Chen. All of their eyes narrowed when they saw this. Their hearts pounded uncontrollably as they felt afraid and uneasy. It had to be mentioned that the blood had been purposefully left behind by the past Grand Exalt, the ancient Sky Wolf. It was so powerful and terrifying that it frightened even the old woman. If an accident really occurred, and the terrifying energy in the blood erupted, the consequences would be unthinkable. Jian Chen had already taken out the Anata Tower. He looked at the two droplets of blood nervously. He was preparing for the worst-case scenario. In the end, the two droplets of blood finally approached each other and slowly merged, turning into a droplet of blood that was larger. The energy inside was peaceful, no longer unstable. With this, all three of them felt relieved. They could finally calm their restless hearts. "Have a look if you can still control the blood," the old woman said to Jian Chen. Jian Chen nodded. Immediately, he used his connection with the power of the bloodline to try control it. Immediately, the power of the bloodline that had fused with the ancient Sky Wolf's essence blood seemed to receive some kind of calling, flying towards Jian Chen. Jian Chen was overjoyed. He could actually control the power of the bloodline like before. However, he no longer dared to make the power of the bloodline return to his body. Instead, he made it hover before his eyes. He studied it sternly and seriously to confirm that there would be no problems or issues with the blood. After a close inspection, Jian Chen discovered that the power of the bloodline had not merged with the ancient Sky Wolf's essence blood properly. It seemed more like the power of the bloodline had surrounded the essence blood, rapidly absorbing the tremendous energy within the essence blood to strengthen itself. Even though the essence blood had been left behind by a past Grand Exalt, it only contained terrifying energy now. It completely allowed the power of the bloodline to rapidly devour its energy without resisting at all. Jian Chen was exulted with this. He had just been worrying that the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline could not increase, so as his personal strength increased, the assistance it would provide would become minuscule. However, he had never thought that he would have such a great fortuitous encounter, accidentally finding a droplet of essence blood from the ancient Skywolf. It's just a pity that the energy in the essence blood can only be absorbed by the power of the bloodline that shares the same origins. Otherwise, it will resist instinctively and lead to severe consequences. It looks like it'll still take quite some time before the power of the bloodline completely absorbs the essence blood, Jian Chen thought. He completely stopped worrying and allowed the power of the bloodline back into his body. Afterwards, Jian Chen looked at the small, wooden hut enveloped by a barrier. Since the miniature world was where the ancient Skywolf had passed away, it went without saying that the wooden hut contained the ancient Skywolf's legacy. This was a Grand Exalt's legacy. Even though Jian Chen cultivated the chaotic body, it was an irresistible temptation. Don't fantasize about it. It's impossible for you to get through the barrier because it's a bloodline barrier. Only members of the Wolf clan with the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline have the right to enter. Although you possess the power of the ancient Skywolf's bloodline, you're still a human in the end, said the old woman. Although the old woman said that, Jian Chen did not give up. This was a Grand Exalt's legacy after all. It tempted him so much that he struggled to remain calm. Afterwards, Jian Chen let out the power of the bloodline once again in an attempt to pass through the barrier. However, Jian Chen failed this time. Using the power of the bloodline as a support, he tried everything he could think of, but it all resulted in failure in the end. It was as if the old woman was right, and only members of the Wolf clan could enter. Don't even think about attacking the barrier and wasting all of its energy because this was personally cast down by a grand exalt. That will never work, the old woman added at the end. With that, she turned around and left. Jian Chen looked at the indestructible barrier in pity. He sighed helplessly. He knew that the ancient Sky Wolf's legacy was not something that he could possess, so in the end, he could only leave reluctantly with Kai Ya. After passing through the stone doorway, the two of them returned to the barren meteor. They flew out from the hole they had dug and discovered the old woman standing on its edge, staring at the dark sky sternly. They've come. They've come faster than I imagined. The concealing formation has gradually become useless. The old woman stood there and sighed deeply. Is it the divine generals of the heavenly palace of Bishing? Jian Chen also frowned and stared at the pitch-black sky that had no starlight. He became rather nervous. The Anata Tower was still on him. That's right. It's them. They're the most loyal guards of the heavenly palace of Bishing. Every single divine general has been picked from countless prodigies after tight screenings. All of them have received the full support of the heavenly palace of Bishing, so they're all extremely powerful. Only those supreme prodigies can match these divine generals, making them very difficult to deal with, the old woman said slowly. Then she looked at Jian Chen and Kai Ya and said sincerely, the two of you should go quick. You should leave here before the divine generals arrive just in case it leads to any unnecessary problems. The origin of ways from before should have all been yours, but I couldn't control myself, so I absorbed some of it. As a result, I owe you a favor. However, I am in trouble now, and after fleeing for all those years, I've used up everything I have. As a result, I probably can't return this favor, the old woman said in some shame. Senior, why don't you enter the tower? We can escape together. Jian Chen took out the Anata Tower and said to the old woman. The old woman was not a bad person. She had only been hunted down because of her master. He really wanted to help her out. The old woman shook her head. She said bitterly, after fleeing for all those years, I've grown weary. I don't want to live a life on the run anymore. I'm choosing to die here, to die where the ancient Sky Wolf passed away. It's quite the honor for me. The old woman looked at Jian Chen deeply. I must warn you sincerely that the tower in your hands is an object of desire. It's impossible for you to keep it with your strength, so find the time to return it to the heavenly palace of Bishing. You must bear in mind that the tower cannot end up in the hands of the divine generals. Otherwise, this great merit would be stolen away by them. You must go to the heavenly palace of Bishing personally and return it. Only then will you benefit the most. You might even receive the protection of the First Majesty of the heavenly palace of Bishing. In the current Saints world, being able to receive the protection of the First Majesty is more important than anything else because the First Majesty is one of the most powerful existences in the Saints world apart from Grand Exalts. Boom! At this moment, a deafening rumble rang out from the sky, and a pulse of energy that frightened Jian Chen wreaked havoc in outer space. The sudden occurrence made all three of their expressions change. Oh no, they've actually arrived so quickly. They must have used secret techniques and directly teleported over from somewhere distant. It looks like they're determined to kill me this time. They don't want to give me any time to catch my breath, the old woman said gravely. Then she glanced at Jian Chen and Kai Ya and said urgently, the two of you go. Leave here as quickly as possible. Don't get caught up accidentally. With that, the old woman shot off into the sky. She unleashed her presence at the primordial realm without holding back at all, charging into outer space with determination and a spirit that did not fear death. She went to fight the divine generals who hunted her down one last time. The concealing formation outside the meteor had already shattered, and a damaged formation disk fell out of space, turning to dust. Xian Ming had cast down this formation disk. It was quite of impressive quality, and it could kill infinite primes. However, under the attacks of the divine generals, it had already shattered before it was of any use. Without the obstruction of the formation, the concealed starlight appeared before Jian Chen and Kai Ya once again. However, the two of them were in no mood to admire the enchanting starry sky. Instead, they stared up ahead sternly. Booms rang out in outer space in a grand fashion. He could clearly see the old woman locked in an intense battle against two experts shining with golden light. Primordial realm laws interwove as they clashed in the most intense fashion. It was devastating to the point where even the celestial bodies seemed to dim. The entire region of space trembled as cracks appeared one after another. Kaya, let's go. Jian Chen glanced at the frightening pulses of energy in outer space one last time before taking out a small spaceship from his space ring without any hesitation, leaving with Kaya in the other direction. It was impossible for him to interfere in the battle between the old woman and the two divine generals. Even after reaching the great perfection of sword spirit, he would be of no help at all. Bang! Just when the spaceship flew off the meteor, it seemed to collide against an invisible wall. It shook violently, coming to a sudden halt. Oh no, it's a spatial barrier. The divine generals have sealed up this space. We can't escape, Jian Chen cried out as his expression became extremely ugly. Doesn't that mean we can't leave? Kaya's face changed slightly as well. Jian Chen stood within the small spaceship as he looked at the battle between the three in the distance uneasily. With a flip of his hand, he took out the Cosmic Movement Talisman. Jian Chen was about to use the Cosmic Movement Talisman, but he was hesitating. This was his last Cosmic Movement Talisman. He really was reluctant to use it unless he faced death. He understood that the divine generals of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng would not be hostile towards him. After all, his brother Ming Dong was the 9th Majesty of the Heavenly Palace of Bisheng. With that, the divine generals would never create any trouble for him. What he truly worried about was whether the two divine generals were able to sense the Anata Tower. If they could sense the Anata Tower, the Anata Tower would definitely leave with them. At this moment, Kaya grabbed Jian Chen's hand and stopped him from activating the Cosmic Movement Talisman. She said, "We're not facing death right now, so let's not use the talisman yet. Perhaps this won't develop horribly." "Let's hope so." Jian Chen's hand around the Cosmic Movement Talisman loosened. He stared at the intense battle in outer space sternly. The old woman fought the two divine generals at the same time, engaging in an extremely intense battle. Like streams of light, laws clashed time and time again. The collapsed space caused countless stars to dim. The old woman appeared to be defeated soon after they had begun fighting. Very soon, she vomited blood from the battle against the two divine generals, having been knocked away. She just happened to fly in the direction of Jian Chen's small spaceship. Jian Chen hesitated slightly before flying out of the spaceship and catching the old woman when he saw this. The old woman's face was extremely pale, and she was covered in blood. She coughed a few times violently and said with a hoarse, frail voice, "You can't interfere with this matter, so don't get drawn into it." That was what she said on the surface, but Jian Chen heard another voice. "Do not take out the Anata Tower. As long as you hide the Anata Tower, it's impossible for the two divine generals to discover it." The old woman's message made Jian Chen settle down. He finally became relieved. At the same time, the sword spirits hid deeply as well. The current Jian Chen was no longer the puny cultivator from the past. As his strength rapidly increased, he became better at hiding himself. Coupled with the cooperation of the sword spirits, he was confident that even chaotic primes would not be able to discover the sword spirits when he faced them. Suddenly, Jian Chen became blinded by golden light. He turned his head to look over and saw that the two divine generals had appeared nearby like they had teleported in their special golden armor. Their armor shone with the blinding light that was as dazzling as the sun. Basking under the golden hue, the two divine generals became hazy and blurry, making them seem just like gods, where they were holy and inviolable. Immediately, Jian Chen felt his body sink. His clothes became pressed against his body tightly as if they were under some sort of pressure. The terrifying presence from the two divine generals made Jian Chen feel like he was carrying a mountain. He also felt like he was suffocating. Chaotic primes. Jian Chen's heart shivered as he became extremely stern. Kaya also flew out of the spaceship and arrived beside Jian Chen. She also stared at the two divine generals sternly and cautiously. However, the two divine generals did not even glance at Jian Chen and Kaya. In their eyes, god kings were no different from ants. Jian Chen and Kaya failed to interest them at all. The two of them looked at the old woman and one of them growled, "Su Ran, you're done for this time. Su Ran, you have already been on the run for millions of years. You must be tired. The two of us have chased you for millions of years as well, so we're tired as well. Let's end this permanently this time so that we can return and report the completion of this mission." One of the divine generals sighed gently. The feelings in his voice were rather mixed. Su Ran's master was a disciple of the Anata Grand Exalt, while they were loyal guards raised diligently by the heavenly palace of Bisheng. They all possessed many secret techniques, including several ones for escape. As a result, this pursuit and escape lasted for millions of years. Only today could it finally come to an end. I have indeed become tired after running for so many years. Dying in your hands today is like liberation. Do it, the old woman said calmly. She had already accepted death. She was truly ready to face death. But the two of them have nothing to do with me. They've only arrived here accidentally, so I hope you don't make things difficult for them. The old woman glanced at Jian Chen and Kai Ya in some shame. Jian Chen could see the shame in the old woman's eyes. He could tell that this sense of shame came from the origin of ways. Only you are a part of our mission, said one of the divine generals. They did not pay any attention to Jian Chen and Kai Ya at all. The old woman smiled sadly. Everything is all caused by the same person. Although my master allowed me to stand where I do today, I will also be dying because of him. However, before I die, I still must tell you that not only did I have no idea about my master's past mistake, but I also had nothing to do with it either. At the same time, on a continent extremely distant from the old woman's location, a hazy figure shrouded in light sat on a throne within a majestic golden hall. Laws revolved around this person and shone brightly such that they seemed to have fused with the hazy figure completely, making them inseparable. This was truly fusing with the laws of the world and becoming a part of them. This person represented the supreme level of cultivation in the universe. At this moment, the hazy figure opened her eyes. What kind of eyes were they? They were icy, emotionless, colorless, and cold. Its gaze was enchanting, as if it could peer into the past and the future with a single glance and see the mysteries of the universe. Whole spirit. At this moment, the person spoke. Her voice was cold and seemed to possess all the voices in the world, providing no detail about any features of the person whatsoever. Master. A ruddy, benevolent old man silently appeared. He stood below in a bow, greeting the figure on the throne politely. From this moment onwards, stop hunting down Su Ran, the figure said coldly. Yes, master. The figure on the throne seemed to possess infinite authority. Every single action and word represented the will of the world. Like he had received an imperial edict, the ruddy old man immediately carried out the order without asking for the reason at all. In the next moment, a wondrous mental pulse radiated out from the majestic hall. It passed through space and time, arriving in the minds of the two divine generals instantly. Su Ran, we already know that you were drawn into this matter by the seventh majesty, as the first majesty never took a stance. We don't want to kill you either, but the whole spirit has given orders. Unless the majesties stand forward to protect you, we can't disobey, a divine general said, but his voice came to a sudden halt. Immediately, he glanced at the other divine general in surprise. Hall spirit? Ha 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 ha. It's actually the Hall spirit. The person that wanted me dead was actually the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. The old woman laughed sadly. She originally believed that one of the majesties had passed down orders to kill her, but she had never thought it would actually be the artifact spirit of the heavenly palace of Bisheng. The two divine generals looked at Su Ran with complicated gazes. After a moment of silence, one of them said, Su Ran, congratulations. From today onwards, you are truly free. With that, the two divine generals slowly withdrew their presences and no longer bore any killing intent. Congratulations? Ha ha ha. Do the two of you want to scoff at me before you kill me? Fair enough. I've made you go on a wild goose chase for several millions of years. It has taken up quite a lot of your time that could have been spent on cultivation. I even injured the two of you during this time, so I can understand that you have resentment towards me. If that's the case, scoff all you want, and then give me a quick death. Liberate me, the old woman smiled sadly. The two divine generals knew that the old woman had misunderstood. They sighed helplessly and explained, The Hall Spirit has sent orders to stop hunting you down from today onwards. The old woman was stunned when she heard that. She stopped laughing, and she stared at the two divine generals blankly. Disbelief filled her face. What did you say? Only a while later did the old woman ask blankly. The Hall Spirit has retracted the order to hunt you down. Su Ran, you are no longer a target of us, so congratulations, you are truly free, one of the divine generals said again. The old woman was completely dumbstruck as if she was unable to process that. Quite a while later, she smiled idiotically and murmured, "I'm free. I'm free. I'm actually free again." The old woman laughed louder and louder, where she seemed like she had become insane at the end. In all these years of being hunted down, she had looked forward to and hoped that the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing could look into the matter and deem her innocent countless times. She hoped that they would not draw her into her master's past mistakes. This was because she was truly innocent. She had no idea that her master had committed such a sin in the past. But unfortunately, she had waited painfully for so long while being on the run, but the divine generals continued to hunt her down relentlessly. This made her understand the brutal truth that perhaps the majesties of the heavenly palace of Bishing really did not care about her at all. In other words, whether she was related to the matter at all, and whether she died or not, would not raise the attention of the majesties at all. The first majesty, in particular, could look into the matter and clear her name easily with the former shocking level of cultivation. In reality, from how the First Majesty never personally took action against her, Xueqi already understood that the First Majesty knew she was innocent, but she said nothing for her. The actions of the majesties from the heavenly palace of Bishing allowed Xueqi to understand something quite some time ago. The majesties never targeted her. But it was also because of this that they would not stand forward for her. They did not take her seriously. Otherwise, how would she still be alive today? After all, she was only a chaotic prime when she was at her peak condition. Across all the great planes and planets of the Saints' world, chaotic primes were experts who could reign over an entire region. They were existences of great status, but they were nothing before the heavenly palace of Bishing. As a result, after fleeing for her life for so many years, Xueqi gradually gave up on the hopes of living. She knew that she was going to die and only hoped for liberation. But she had never thought that when she truly gave up on living and was about to die, the heavenly palace of Bishing would rescind their initial order. The two divine generals did not stay for long. After declaring that they had received orders to spare Xueqi, the two of them directly flew towards where the ancient sky wolf had passed away in cultivation. They were chaotic primes, so they had discovered the dwelling as soon as they arrived here. However, they were in no shape to think about it as they fought Xueqi earlier. The stone door to the dwelling remained wide open. When Jian Chen emerged from there, he did want to close the door again, but he was unable to find a method. As a result, he could only allow the doorway to remain open, allowing the two divine generals to enter the dwelling without any obstruction. However, they did not stay in there for long. They left after just a short while, hurrying back to the heavenly palace of Bishing to report their success. "Congratulations on your new life, senior." Jian Chen clasped his fist at the old woman and congratulated her sincerely after the two divine generals had left. By now, the old woman had gradually calmed down. She stared at the vast starry sky above her head and sighed deeply. The emotions in her eyes were extremely mixed. After a moment of silence, she said slowly, "The concealing formation has already shattered, and the heavenly secrets here have now become exposed. Before long, those peak experts who are skilled at foreseeing things will sense this place. It'll become a place of trouble very soon. We can't stay here." The old woman glanced at the small spaceship behind her and said to Jian Chen and Kai Ya, "It'll be extremely dangerous for you to move through outer space with your strength. It'll be very difficult for you to fend off primordial realm space beasts once you encounter them, so let's go. I'll leave with you." With that, the old woman directly made her way towards the spaceship nearby. Jian Chen and Kai Ya looked at each other before making their way towards the spaceship as well. Before long, the spaceship turned into a streak of light and left the place. "Where are you going to next?" The old woman sat in the spaceship as she rested and healed. In thought, Jian Chen said, "Senior, to be honest, we're lost in space. Right now, we only want to find a place where there are teleportation formations that can transport us to another plane. We're going to decide where we go next after that." The old woman nodded. A while later she said, "The closest place is planet Tianming of the 81 Great Planets. I have the spatial coordinates of planet Tianming, so let's go there for now." Planet Tianming, Jian Chen was surprised. Afterwards, he obtained the coordinates from the old woman, and they directly made their way towards the planet. "My wounds are rather heavy. Shen Ming's abilities as a radiant god king can assist me in healing. Without the concealing formation, Shen Ming can't come out, so let me into the tower," said the old woman. "Yes, senior," Jian Chen answered straightforwardly and immediately took out the Anata Tower. "My name is Xueqi." You must have learnt it from the two divine generals already. I don't need that much respect, and coupled with what happened with the origin of ways, I owe you a huge favor, so there's no need for you to be so polite with me. You can just call me by my name. Remember, if you encounter any dangers outside, you must contact me immediately. After telling Jian Chen some things, Su Ran vanished into the Anata Tower. Afterwards, Jian Chen steered the small spaceship through the vast outer space in a straight path. He had already broken through with the way of the sword, so his chaotic body could reach the 13th layer now. However, he could encounter various dangers at any time in outer space, so Jian Chen needed to maintain his greatest vigilance at all times. As a result, it was impossible for him to cultivate here peacefully. He could only delay the breakthrough. After flying through space for 5 years, Su Ran finally made a full recovery under Xian Ming's assistance. When she emerged from the Anata Tower, they no longer used the spaceship of poorer quality and limited speed. Instead, she carried Jian Chen and Kai Ye with her as she moved through outer space with her own cultivation. They were countless times faster than the spaceship. After another year of traveling like this, they finally arrived at their destination, planet Tianming. Jian Chen stared at the huge planet from outer space, and he was greatly shocked. Just the diameter of the planet had left him stumped. He had no idea how wide it was. That was how large the planet was. If it was flattened, it would basically be the same size as the cloud plane. The Saints' world has a total of 81 great planets. Planet Tianming ranks towards the bottom, but no matter how low its ranking is, there are still many large organizations and clans on them. Even during my peak, I dared not stand against them, so don't act recklessly on planet Tianming, Su Ran said to Jian Chen and Kai Ye sternly. There's a rather special organization on planet Tianming. It's called the Empyrean Demon Cult. Even though their strongest experts on the planet are only infinite primes, bear in mind that you should never provoke them. In the past, the strongest expert of planet Tianming, the planet lord who ruled the entire planet, was slain by a supreme expert of the Empyrean Demon Cult because he had provoked the Empyrean Demon Cult. His head was hung high up above the planet lord's estate. An undetectable cold light immediately flashed through Jian Chen's eyes when he heard the Empyrean Demon Cult again. He could still clearly remember how he and Kai Ye had been hunted down by one of the vice leaders, Huai, on the Cloud Plain. He could remember every moment of when they fled desperately to the Blood Sun Empire. He was only an overgod back then. Against Huai, who had reached the primordial realm, he was literally helpless. If it were not for the Divine King, who kept Huai busy for a while, he probably would not have been able to escape to the Blood Sun Empire. However, even with that being the case, Huai still pursued them to the imperial capital of the Blood Sun Empire. If a primordial realm expert from the Blood Sun Empire did not intervene and stop Huai, Jian Chen and Kai Ye probably would not have been able to board the spatial battleship and leave the Cloud Plain. It could be said that they had left against their wills, forced to do so by the vice leader of the Empyrean Demon Cult. Huai and Jian Chen did not even have the chance to bid farewell to the people of the Tian Yuan clan. Naturally, he held extremely deep resentment for Huai. I wonder if I can kill Huai once I reach the 13th layer of the chaotic body, Jian Chen pondered. He could not help but tighten his fist. He was rather eager to increase his strength. Senior Su Ran, I want to stay on planet Tianming for a while. I need to enter seclusion immediately and raise my strength. I don't plan on leaving until I break through, Jian Chen quickly made up his mind and said to Su Ran. Su Ran thought about it a little and nodded. That works too. I just happen to need some time for cultivation as well. Although I've already recovered from my wounds, I still need quite a lot of time to recover my lost cultivation so that I can return to my peak condition. Afterwards, the three of them landed on planet Tianming together. They were about to find a city as a temporary place to settle down in, but when they passed through a divine kingdom, they saw a battlefield in the distance where smoke rose up everywhere. An army composed of many origin realm and godhood cultivators were engaged in a battle of life and death, leading to so much bloodshed that it formed rivers. In the sky, powerful energy formed storms that wreaked havoc in the surroundings. Several dozen god kings engaged in an intense battle. It's the Empyrean Demon Cult. Looking at the demonic aura that occupied half the sky, Jian Chen could tell with a single glance that one side belonged to the Empyrean Demon Cult, as he had also gone through something similar. As he watched soldiers constantly die on the battlefield, Jian Chen fell silent. He felt sorrow for their deaths from the bottom of his heart. He already knew that the Empyrean demon cult waged wars constantly in different places not to increase their strength. Rather, it was to collect the essence, blood and soul energy of all the cultivators who died in the war. After that, they could condense blood beads and soul beads through a powerful formation. After sighing secretly, Jian Chen did not stay there for much longer. He traveled off into the distance. Before long, they stopped in the imperial capital of an ancient empire called Thousand Leaf. Not only are there powerful formations protecting the city, but the origin energy here is also several times denser than outside. Let's just stay here for now, Su Ran looked at the grand city and said to Jian Chen and Kai Ya. But very soon, her expression became extremely strange. She stared at Jian Chen deeply and said, "You better disguise yourself." "Disguise myself?" Jian Chen was surprised when he heard that. He looked at the city up ahead like he was in thought as he immediately began to disguise himself. Before long, he and Kai Ya had adopted a completely different appearance. Concealing their presences, they entered the city with Su Ran. As soon as they set foot in the city, Jian Chen saw many wanted posters depicting him. The side of the image depicted his various characteristics, including the techniques he was skilled in, what kind of laws he used, and so on. "The people who have set a bounty on me is actually the solitary sword lineage." When Jian Chen saw the 3 words on the bottom of the poster, his face hardened. As long as you provide a tip that leads to Jian Chen, you can obtain a vast amount of wealth from the solitary sword ancestor, and he'll owe you a favor. If you can directly capture Jian Chen and hand over him to the solitary sword ancestor, he'll include 3 chances for the solitary sword ancestor to take action personally for whatever is needed. TSK. I never would have thought that this young man called Jian Chen would actually be so valuable. Through him, it's possible to obtain 3 chances of asking a Grand Prime to take action personally. Moreover, the person is the solitary sword ancestor. The solitary sword ancestor is a famed figure across the Saints' world. Even among Grand Primes, he's quite the expert. Su Ran glanced at Jian Chen mysteriously and sighed emotionally. Right? The solitary sword ancestor is a renowned peak expert of the current Saints' world. A single favor from him is enough to interest many everlasting empires and peak organizations, let alone being able to ask him to take action for whatever you want 3 times. Ever since the solitary sword ancestor set up a bounty for Jian Chen a few years ago, not only have many organizations on our planet begun searching for this person called Jian Chen, but there have also been many organizations from the other Great Plains and Great Planets who have devoted quite a lot of effort to find him as well. They all want to be able to ask the solitary sword ancestor to take action for them 3 times. People whispered nearby as soon as Su Ran had finished speaking. Rumor has it that the solitary sword ancestor is a 5th heavenly layer Grand Prime. That's enough to become the undisputed greatest expert on our dark sky planet. Let alone our planet, the solitary sword ancestor would be invincible on the Great Plains that rank towards the bottom as well. People discussed constantly in the surroundings. All of them talked about the solitary sword ancestor in great interest. "Let's go and find somewhere to settle down first," Su Ran said to Jian Chen and left immediately. After they had left, a slender but extremely ugly woman arrived before Jian Chen's wanted poster. She stared at Jian Chen's appearance closely as if she was trying to memorize it completely. "Before me is an opportunity of a lifetime. Jian Chen, although we have no grievances, I have to find you because only by finding you will the solitary sword ancestor owe me a favor, and through this favor, I can ask the solitary sword ancestor to take action and rescue Sister Qingyi Xuan from the Gus clan." The ugly woman clenched her hand tightly as determination flooded her eyes. She swore inside. "Sister Qingyi Xuan, just wait for me. I will definitely find a way to save you." Jian Chen, Kai Ya, and Su Ran found an inn to settle down in temporarily. They paid to stay for 3 years all at once. Jian Chen directly went to his room after that and set up formations to enter seclusion. Jian Chen sat in the room as several space rings appeared in his hand. He began to tidy through the cultivation resources quietly to prepare for the breakthrough. Jian Chen had accumulated a large amount of cultivation resources from his trip to the Neptunian Divine Palace. Even though he had given many of them to his sister, he still had plenty on him right now. For the sake of convenience, Jian Chen sorted through all the resources before storing all of them into one space ring. After doing all that, he took out the 2 god-tier heavenly resources that he was unable to tell the grades of from his space ring first and wolfed them down. The 2 heavenly resources were of extremely high grades. They came from the space ring of a Grand Prime. There had been a total of 5 of them. He gave 3 to Xue Yunlan so that she could give them to his sister. As soon as the heavenly resources reached his stomach, it turned into tremendous energy that flooded Jian Chen's body completely. It was ferocious and brutal, forcefully making Jian Chen's body swell. If it were some other god king, they probably would have directly exploded to pieces if they were in Jian Chen's shoes because the energy in the 2 heavenly resources was just too vast. However, Jian Chen's chaotic body was about to break through to major achievement now, so it was extremely tough. As a result, the energy that filled his body posed no harm to him. Jian Chen's dantian seemed to have turned into a vortex, devouring the energy that had filled his body with no signs of stopping. As he practiced his cultivation method, the energy was compressed and refined into strands of pure chaotic force that were stowed away in his chaotic nidin. It just had to be mentioned that as Jian Chen made progress with chaotic force and broke through layer after layer, his rate of refinement and absorption reached a completely new level as well. Before too long, Jian Chen had refined the 2 god-tier heavenly resources completely. The terrifying energy within the 2 heavenly resources are only enough to cover 1/5 of what I require to reach the 13th layer. It looks like the amount of energy I need to break through completely surpasses my estimates. Jian Chen gradually opened his eyes after refining the 2 heavenly resources. After a moment of thought, he took out over several dozen heavenly resources that he had obtained from the divine medicinal garden, as well as mountainous piles of high-grade and supreme-grade divine crystals. He continued to cultivate. Among the 49 great plains of the saints' world, one was known as the Lone Heaven Plain. The Lone Heaven Plain was also divided into the eastern, western, southern, northern, and central plains. These 5 regions also had many divine kingdoms and empires. The Lone Heaven Plain even had 3 everlasting empires. However, the most awe-inspiring ones were not the 3 everlasting empires or the peak clans that stood at the peak of the plain. Instead, it was the 5 renowned heavenly kings who held absolute authority. The 5 heavenly kings each resided in one region. Their existence made them supreme on the Lone Heaven Plain. Even the 3 everlasting empires and the various peak organizations had to lower themselves out of respect before the 5 heavenly kings. The Azure Peng king of the Azure Peng lineage was one of the 5 heavenly kings. He was located in the central region and took an azure mountain shrouded in clouds as his territory. He had named it Azure Brilliance Mountain. In the saints' world, he was the infamous Azure Peng king, but on the Lone Heaven Plain, he was the great heavenly king of Azure Brilliance. At this moment, on this exact mountain, a disheveled man in a depressing state knelt on the ground as he pressed his head firmly against the ground. "Master, I've come for punishment," the old man said politely. "Song Ying, I specially sent you to protect Mo Cheng. In the end, Mo Cheng's dead, but you're still alive. Do I still have any need for useless people?" The Azure Peng king's cold, dignified voice rang out from the mountain. There was chilling killing intent within the voice. "I deserve 1,000 deaths for having failed to protect the young master. However, before I die, I have something important to report to master. There's another side to the young master's death," Song Ying said politely. "Speak." Afterwards, Song Ying reported everything that had happened in the Neptunian Divine Palace to the Azure Peng king. He dared not lie before the Azure Peng king because the latter could instantaneously discern whether he was telling the truth. In other words, Mo Cheng's death is closely related to that person called Jian Chen? The Azure Peng king's cold voice rang out. "Master, although the young master died to Ming Dong's hands, it was all because of Jian Chen," said Song Ying. When the battle between several hundred supreme god kings erupted in the Neptunian Divine Palace, he and Mo Cheng had worked together against Ming Dong. After being cut in half, Song Ying had become heavily injured and incapacitated. However, he did not die in the battle. Instead, he was saved by a supreme god king who was on good terms with the Azure Peng lineage on the chaotic battlefield, having been sent into a spatial storage artifact. He had only recovered slightly earlier, and after which, he hurried back to the Lone Heaven Plain. "Jian Chen." The Azure Peng king's cold voice rang out from the Azure Brilliance Mountain. The Azure Peng king appeared silently on the peak of the mountain. He gazed at the empty space coldly as heavy killing intent wrapped around him. However, his face seemed sickly pale. The next moment, the Azure Peng king vanished. He had shot off from the Lone Heaven Plain with unbelievable speed, disappearing into the depths of outer space in the blink of an eye. A meteor hovered in the vast outer space silently, without moving at all. The solitary sword ancestor sat on the meteor with his eyes closed. Killing intent revolved around him without dispersing. He had already remained there for many years, silently waiting for news of Jian Chen. No matter where Jian Chen had run off to, he would hurry off as quickly as he could as soon as he learned of his whereabouts. At this moment, there was a flash of azure light. The Azure Pung King had used his extreme speed to shoot through space, arriving before the meteor that the solitary sword ancestor sat on. The death of my disciple is related to Jian Chen. There's nothing I can do about that person from the heavenly palace of Bishing right now, but I have to kill Jian Chen. Solitary sword ancestor, your way of divination is at a higher level than mine. Can't you divine Jian Chen's whereabouts instead of waiting here painfully? Without any greetings, the Azure Pung King directly asked the solitary sword ancestor as soon as he arrived. The solitary sword ancestor gradually opened his eyes. He looked at the pale, still injured Azure Pung King calmly and said, I've tried divination more than just a single time in the past few years in an attempt to find Jian Chen's whereabouts. But in the end, I found nothing. I don't know where he is. He's a mere god king, yet I can't find anything about him. That can only mean three things. The first is that an expert with a cultivation greater than mine is secretly protecting him, obscuring the heavenly secrets for him. The second is that he's hiding in some special place that can mask him from the heavenly secrets, which is why I can't find him. The third is that his life is extraordinary, unbound by the world or unrestrained by the laws. The first is unlikely, while the third is just a baseless rumor. It's extremely likely that he's hiding in a special place. Humph, I'd like to see how long you can keep hiding. The Azure Pung King's face sank, and he immediately took out a jade talisman. He sent a message back to the Azure Brilliance Mountain. Immediately place a bounty on Jian Chen across the entire Saints world and investigate all of Jian Chen's origins for me. With the Azure Pung King's orders, the entire Azure Brilliance Mountain began to move. They passed the Azure Pung King's orders to the three everlasting empires and the various peak clans as quickly as they could. As soon as the various organizations learnt that the Heavenly King of Azure Brilliance had personally passed down an order, they dared not tarry. They spread the news of this bounty as quickly as possible, across the entire Lone Heaven continent very quickly before expanding out to the other Great Plains and planets. He was a mere god king, yet he could make two famed Grand Primes place a bounty on him. Not only did the bounty reach the other planes and planets in the shortest amount of time possible, but Jian Chen had even become a familiar figure between all the major and minor organizations. Even though everyone knew that it was countless times easier to find a needle in a haystack than to find someone hidden in the vast Saints world, the promises of the two Grand Primes was an irresistible temptation to many clans and organizations. This was because all they needed was the support from one of the two experts, and their organizations would rise up. As a result, even when they knew that it was hopeless, many organizations still decided to search for Jian Chen painstakingly. There were even some organizations that had begun investigating Jian Chen's identity and background. They were not the only people searching for Jian Chen. There were many peak clans searching for Jian Chen as well, where a few of them were even renowned throughout the entire Saints world. These people did not search for Jian Chen for the solitary sword ancestor or the Azure Pung King's rewards. They only wanted to kill him. After all, Jian Chen had killed quite a few supreme god kings in the Neptunian Divine Palace. There were even more supreme god kings who had not died to his hands directly but whose deaths were caused by him. He had caused around half of the god king's throne to empty out. Quite a few of these supreme god kings were the futures of these peak clans. They had been nurtured with endless resources. As a result, many people hated Jian Chen dearly in the Saints world. Still in seclusion, Jian Chen had no idea he had become a famed figure that shook up the Saints world. Currently, he was devoting all his efforts to breaking through to the 13th layer of the chaotic body. Very soon, he used up all the heavenly resources that could increase cultivation. Only recovery heavenly resources were left. Not a single high-grade or supreme-grade divine crystal remained either, having all been refined into strands of chaotic force. Now the only resources he had left from the Neptunian Divine Palace were 1,005 colored divine crystals and the tens of million fire divine crystals. Jian Chen was unable to resist his desire for strength now that he neared a breakthrough. As a result, he ignored the wastefulness and took out a large number of fire divine crystals without any hesitation to cultivate. His chaotic body could refine all the energy in the world. As a result, even though the fire divine crystals were filled with pure fire-attributed energy, it was not too different from the supreme-grade divine crystals. The only difference was that the energy within the fire divine crystals was 2 or 3 times purer than supreme-quality divine crystals. Time passed silently. After absorbing over 10 million fire divine crystals in who knew how long, Jian Chen's body shook loudly. The chaotic nidin in his dantian had finally shattered. Jian Chen was experienced with the process that followed. In just a few days, his chaotic force and chaotic body completely changed. The fist-sized chaotic nidin had shrunken back to the size of a soybean, but the chaotic force within it was several times more powerful than before. He had formally reached the 13th layer of the chaotic body, having reached major achievement. Even in the immortals world, only a handful of people had a chaotic body at major achievement. I never thought that the amount of resources exhausted to reach the 13th layer would be so terrifying. Jian Chen opened his eyes. There was no longer the joy from breaking through on his face anymore. He soon frowned instead. The amount of resources he exhausted for this breakthrough had completely surpassed his expectations. However, for each layer of the chaotic body, the resources required would be several times or even over a dozen times more than the last. He could not help but worry about the resources he needed in the future. Sigh, whatever. Jian Chen exhaled gently. He dismissed his thoughts before leaving his room. Kai Ya and Su Ran's formations were tightly sealed, so Jian Chen did not disturb him. Instead, he left the inn alone to investigate some things outside. On the wide, bustling streets outside, Jian Chen could hear people discuss about him everywhere while his wanted posters were stuck everywhere. It caused many people to slow down and take a look. The Azure Peng King has actually placed a bounty on my head as well, Jian Chen frowned. He had already learnt about Mo Cheng's death from everyone's discussions, but Mo Cheng's death actually had nothing to do with him. He only had been in conflict with Zhang Ying at most. He did not understand why the Azure Peng King had placed a bounty on him. Whether it's the Azure Peng King or the solitary sword ancestor, they're both famed experts of the Saints' world. They have terrifying techniques. Although the Saints' world is vast, it shouldn't be anything difficult for them to find a puny god king. All they need to do is forecast my location. It made sense that they could not find me when I was in the concealing formation before, but I've already left it now. Just the time I spent traveling through outer space has amounted to several years. Coupled with the time I spent in seclusion, they should have been able to locate me long ago if they were really searching for me, but they've never come. Instead, they've set a bounty for me across the Saints' world, mobilizing the power of all the cultivators to find me. Seeing how they're paying such a hefty price to mobilize everyone, there's only one explanation, and that's the great abilities of the Azure Peng King and the solitary sword ancestor cannot forecast where I am, Jian Chen thought and instead felt relieved. At the same time, there was a store that especially sold heavenly resources near Jian Chen. A slender woman stood at the counter. Logically speaking, the woman should have possessed impressive beauty from her figure, but her face just happened to be extremely ugly. It was covered with vicious scars that crisscrossed one another. Shopkeeper, please have a look at my heavenly resource and tell me how many divine crystals I can exchange it for. The woman took out a crudely crafted wooden box from her space ring and opened it hesitantly. Immediately, an intoxicating fragrance poured out. Just a single whiff of it was enough for people to focus their minds. A violet peach lay within the crudely crafted box. This is a heavenly resource that can increase the cultivation of people by 500 years. Moreover, its effects are mellow and leave no side effects. Even if mortals ingest them, it will cause them no harm. Shopkeeper, how much do you think it's worth? The woman asked rather uneasily. Even though she could tell that the peach was extraordinary, its grade was just far too low. The moment the woman opened the wooden box, Jian Chen, who was only a few kilometers away, immediately shuddered. He looked ahead as his eyes shone. He said in surprise, "This is the presence of Xianhuang Qi." In the next moment, Jian Chen vanished. Like a bolt of lightning, he crossed the distance as quickly as he could and arrived before the woman silently. What a peculiar presence! The shopkeeper was an old man who seemed to be in his 70s. He studied the peach closely as he showed surprise. He secretly estimated its value. Bang! At this moment, Jian Chen took action with lightning speed, slamming shut the wooden box in the woman's hand to stop the presence from leaking out any further. The wooden box also ended up in Jian Chen's hand. What are you doing? Are you trying to steal from me? The woman stared at Jian Chen, who had suddenly appeared beside her in surprise and fear. She actually failed to react when Jian Chen took the wooden box from her. This meant that the unfamiliar man with an ordinary appearance possessed a cultivation far greater than hers. "Dear customer, the item in your hand was brought here by this lady to be sold. You've stolen it without this lady's permission, so you've broken a rule of the imperial capital." The shopkeeper looked at Jian Chen furiously as he growled. Chapter 2190. The news of an acquaintance. Jian Chen did not seem to hear their words. He clenched the crude box tightly as he became extremely stern. As a matter of fact, his hand that held the wooden box even trembled gently. He had confirmed with a single glance that the violet peach in the box was a violet cloud peach he had given to someone close to him when he left the Tianyuan continent for the Saints' World. Clearly, the peach in the box was a first-grade immortal tier violet cloud peach. Even the crude box that held the peach was something he personally crafted in the past. "Senior, please return the item to me," the woman repeated herself nervously. The violet cloud peach was in Jian Chen's hand, but she dared not snatch it from him. Jian Chen finally returned to his senses. He suppressed his excitement and unease and looked at the woman with a piercing gaze. He said sternly, "Where did you get this from?" Why do I have to tell you, eh? And that's mine, so please return it to me." The woman immediately became uneasy under Jian Chen's piercing gaze. "Sir, this is the imperial capital of the Thousand Leaf Empire. The Xue Spiritual Medicine Store belongs to the Xue family, one of the 3 great organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. Do you plan on resorting to violence in this store owned by the Xue family?" The shopkeeper's voice gradually turned cold. He studied Jian Chen with squinted eyes. Although he could not see through Jian Chen's cultivation and knew that he was a powerful expert, he still felt no fear. The Xue family was one of the 3 peak clans of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They were an existence that could stand at an equal level with the imperial family. With the support of the Xue family, no one was bold enough to cause problems in the store within the Thousand Leaf Empire. Afterwards, the shopkeeper looked at the woman, and undetectable disgust flashed through the depths of his eyes. He said firmly, "Lady, take back what belongs to you. The rules of the imperial capital are enforced here. In the imperial capital, there can only be fair trading. Actions such as forcing people or stealing are forbidden. Otherwise, it would be challenging the Thousand Leaf Empire and looking down on the empire." The shopkeeper directed his words at the end to Jian Chen. Jian Chen ignored the shopkeeper's words. His gaze towards the woman became sharper and sharper as a powerful pressure radiated from his body. He said coldly, "Did you steal this? Tell me, where did you steal it from?" The woman was only a god, so she immediately paled under Jian Chen's pressure. Fear filled her eyes as she said in a trembling voice, "No. My younger sister gave this to me. My sister didn't steal it from anyone either. She said she brought it up with her from a lower world." Jian Chen's face immediately loosened when he heard that. Afterwards, his gaze towards the woman became slightly gentler. He glanced at the furious shopkeeper and frowned slightly. He said to the woman, "If you're telling the truth, then I have close ties with your sister. It's not convenient to talk here, so let's go somewhere else." Jian Chen returned the box with the peach to the woman and made his way out. The Thousand Leaf Empire was only an ancient empire, so he was not afraid that someone would steal the violet cloud peach from the woman under his watch. She's her sister? There are only so many females on the Tianyuan continent who could reach the origin realm. I wonder who has come to the Saints' World, Jian Chen thought. He was eager to know who this acquaintance was. "Hold on. Lady, here are 100 high-grade divine crystals. Please take it, and the heavenly resource in your hand will belong to our store from now on." The shopkeeper suddenly appeared beside the woman and directly shoved a small cloth bag with 100 high-grade divine crystals into the woman's hand before quickly extending his hand towards the wooden box. He had dealt in various heavenly resources for many years now, so he had already developed great insight. Even though he did not recognize the violet cloud peach, he determined that this heavenly resource that was not of a particularly high grade was far more complicated than it seemed from its wondrous presence alone. However, just when the shopkeeper stuck out his hand, another hand grabbed it tightly all of a sudden. Jian Chen, who had already left the store, suddenly appeared again, stopping the shopkeeper. "You want to buy this heavenly resource with a measly 100 high-grade divine crystals? You've sure done your calculations well. We're not selling, Jian Chen sneered. The violet cloud peach contained Shen Huang Qi. This was something significant that could not be exposed in the saint's world. You dash, the shopkeeper was furious. Just when he was about to call out, he forcefully swallowed his words when he saw Jian Chen's glare. He dared not say anything. This was because he felt chills from the glare, striking fear in his heart. Let's go, Jian Chen did not stick around. He left the store after calling to the woman. The woman hesitated before leaving with Jian Chen in the end. Very soon, Jian Chen brought the woman to a remote region of the city. He looked at the woman deeply and said, "What's the name of the person who gave you this?" The woman looked at Jian Chen and hesitated. She was uncertain about the relationship between the person before her and her sister. If he was her enemy, she would be dooming her sister. However, as soon as she thought about the situation her sister currently faced, she immediately made up my mind. My sister's name is Qing Yishuan. Do you really know her? Qing Yishuan. It's actually her. Jian Chen was taken aback. He had never thought that the first acquaintance he would encounter from his homeland in the saint's world would be Qing Yishuan. I never thought that Qing Yishuan would have come to the saint's world as well. But it makes sense now that I think about it. Qing Yishuan's talent was never poor. Under the poor environment of the Tianyuan continent, she was still able to cultivate until Saint King. Now that origin energy is gradually recovering on the Tianyuan continent, and the world there is connected to the saint's world, the cultivation environment has improved dramatically. With Qing Yishuan's talent, reaching the origin realm is nothing difficult, Jian Chen smiled faintly. He was delighted. It truly was something worthy of celebration to be able to reunite with an acquaintance in a foreign land. Seeing Jian Chen's expression, the woman finally confirmed that not only did the person before her know her sister, but they were not enemies either. She was relieved. Where's Qing Yishuan right now? Jian Chen asked. My sister's situation is quite negative. She has been captured by the people of the Gus clan, so she's in constant danger. See, can you save my sister? The woman stared at Jian Chen closely as hope filled her face. However, she sighed in disappointment again as she seemed depressed. The Gus clan was one of the 3 peak organizations of the Thousand Leaf Empire. They possessed a primordial realm expert and stood on the same level as the imperial family. As someone who had come up from a lower world recently, even if Qing Yishuan knew people in the saint's world, it was impossible for them to be very powerful with her level of cultivation. What did you say? Qing Yishuan has been captured? Jian Chen's smile disappeared, and his face immediately sank. You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.